The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. The viewer is invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
the top talents in the comic book business are here to tell everything they know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Tuesday night, another Industry of Comics show. It's kind of weird how synchronicity works around Beyond Wednesdays. It just follows us, and it definitely follows me everywhere I go. I notice it all the time. We're getting ready to talk about the mid-year point in the comic book industry, and guess what date is the mid-year point? July 2nd.
June 2nd? Yeah.
July 2nd is the mid-year point of the year. So it couldn't be any better, right?
Well, but it's a leap year, so
yeah, that kind of throws a wrench in. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
How you guys doing? What's good? Anything new? Interesting?
A lot is going on in the comic book universe at Just James Comics. We go through full remodel. We have just rented out the last about 1,500 square feet to a new subleaser. We're bringing in record albums. That's another thing that's coming in. We're just working on sports and stuff like that. But just mid-year, you start to look at your numbers. You start to look at what's turning, what didn't turn, what platforms actually work. And so when you put all those numbers together and you get to that 6-month period, you realize, okay, this is the direction we have to go. And probably one of the busiest months during the year, which is July in the comic book universe.
Yeah. Dennis, how about you?
Well, I mean, what am I doing? I'm buying stuff. I'm having fun. I just bought, I don't know, 3 collections today. I've been gone for 4 days, and I came back and everybody was stacked up. And, you know, I bought a PS2, a PS1. I bought a bunch of controllers. I bought a shit ton of Mario figures. You know, because those are evergreens.
Yeah.
And, you know, I bought a 90s collection, and I kid you not, you know, we all have our sales pitches, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, you know, this is 90s starting lineup. It's all garbage. But the second you buy this stuff and you start thinking, it's garbage to me. It's garbage to the two of you. You've seen enough of this stuff. And the second you price it and you sell 5 off Jump Street, you know, at $5, 3 for $10. And you're just like, oh, it's right. Even though I've gotten my head around this to buy the crap and to price the crap at crappy prices, it's still relevant to someone. It's someone's nostalgia. And I spent the entire weekend at my family's house just talking, and I still haven't peeled enough of the onion to realize it's all nostalgia.
Yeah.
And it's a different level for everyone.
Right. I think it's that, but you got to also think that the person that is 25, let's say 19 to 30, that's great product for them to get started in. You know, they talk about the 90s. Well, now they get to partake in it. You know, they're not standing 3 hours in line to get Death of Superman. They're getting it now. They get to feel that excitement as we start to sell it to them. So I think that's a big barometer as well. So
yeah. Well, I gotta before we bring in our guest today, I gotta say that over the last about 2 weeks now, I've jumped back into the live selling game, and it has been unbelievable for me. I got to be honest. I quit doing live selling about 2 years ago because it hit the floor. I mean, it wasn't
It became the floor.
Yeah, it became the floor. It wasn't worth jumping on there for me anymore. I sat back for 2 years. And I jumped back on there about 2 weeks ago, and it has been absolutely amazing. And, you know, to talk about that one part about it for me personally, as we're getting ready to go into the mid-year review, is very interesting because throughout the year, it's been a little bit negative, let's just say, across the board. But when you talk to people who are actually slinging and selling, it's been pretty good. So it's going to be very interesting to have this conversation tonight. And
well, let's bring them on, and then we can start this conversation, because I don't want to waste any of it without Nick here.
Well, thank you for interrupting me. You're so good at that, Dennis. To talk about that, one of probably the most informed people when it comes to the secondary market and comic books, ladies and gentlemen, key collector Nick, as we so lovingly call him around here. Nick, how you doing, brother?
Good. How are you guys?
Excellent, man.
Awesome. It's nice to see everybody. I'm excited to talk about this industry halfway through the year. We're halfway through the year. I understand it's July 2nd.
July 2nd. There you go. Look at that.
Right? But it is a leap year.
Yeah, it is.
Which I forgot about. Is it really a leap year?
Yeah, every presidential year is also the leap year.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Wow,
Good
that's interesting.
Dennis.
That's good. That's good Dennis facts right there.
Yeah, really. That is a Dennis fact.
Yeah.
So real quick, I wanted to give a shout out. So on my way back from Illinois, I was passing through Lafayette, Indiana, because my son wants to go to Purdue, and we wanted to check out the campus there and everything. And so I called my good buddy who lives near there, John Tyler Christopher, and he's like, "Hey, come on over for some tacos."
Nice.
I was like, "Okay, I can't not have tacos. That's like pancakes with Prince, you know." And unbelievable house. Oh my God, it's right out of like Austin Powers, Los Angeles. You know, you could see Dean Martin's spy. What was his spy's name? Chat, help me out. Whatever that spy Dean Martin character was. It's the dopest house ever, and we're having fresh made tacos from a Mexican recipe that he had. And we're just talking about nostalgia. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to harp on all night tonight. Because where this industry thinks it wants to go, I'm always horrible with the hands. The audience, the customers, Nick, key collector, you're seeing it. Nostalgic covers are the ones that are hitting hard with you right now.
Nostalgia is king.
It's absolutely. And then you look at the successes. You look at the failures of this year, which Blood Hunt had a really out of the box, we got this rare variant of Thor's head, but now everyone is trashing on it. And, and then you look at what the successes are. Nikki Barucci's Thundercats.
I was going to say, all the 80s properties, you got Thundercats, Space Ghost,
G.I. Joe, Transformers, all of this stuff. And guess what? It's not
Turtles.
Rocket science, guys. People want to relive their childhoods.
Right. Didn't Turtles just sell like 300,000 copies of that new premiere issue with Jason Aaron writing it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, and it's generational, right? So like right now, you get a lot of the 80s and the early 90s nostalgia properties. But if you're somebody that wants to invest and think ahead, you start thinking about, okay, what is nostalgia 10 years from now? What is nostalgia 15, 20 years from now? And it definitely is what? It's the MCU. It's going to be the MCU at some point. So
great point.
There's going to be, and so, you gotta think about what kids are, growing up with now, because comics seems to always try to dabble in any type of pop culture phenomenon, whether it's Minecraft or whether it's, Monster High or whatever it might be. There's some sort of connection to comic books.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I saw the Monster High. That's a new book coming out. That's going to be a major nostalgic book. And what a great idea to bring young girls who grew up with that into the hobby.
Can I tell you a Monster High story?
Mm-hmm.
Please do.
So my daughter, who's 18 right now, Monster High came out 11 years ago. She was 7, and she was like, I like this. And, she liked the monster aspect of it. She didn't care about Barbie. She liked the cute. There's a whole lore with those guys. She's in all of the little Instagram groups. And then, Daddy got to go to San Diego. Daddy got to get the exclusive Monster High dolls. She was the only girl with any of these.
Yeah.
So, and some of these are like $400 or $500 now too. So, she kept a lot of them in the box, like just because of my influence, I'm sure. About 2 years ago, Mattel started selling these nostalgias. they started having $85 doll drops on their page, and they'd sell out in 5-10 minutes. And it was crazy shit like, you know, The Shining Monster High or Gremlins Monster High. And they were going for the adult collector, but they were also feeding this 80s and 90s nostalgia into these girls that are only teen girls.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. We would stop everything at the warehouse, and we'd have 3 computers open just to buy 2 of these, one for the store and one for my daughter. So this thing started, and I've had my finger on the pulse of it, but she's also the same thing what we just said. You know, why are you going in this direction when, you know, when you can see clearly it's this other direction? And then they had this giant booth at San Diego, which I'm sure slipped right past Jesse and Brian, but it was to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Monster High. And I went through there because they had a different little knick-knack you could get every day. And my daughter went in every day to get the little pin or the lanyard or the whatever. And I was looking at the people who were buying it, and it wasn't just my daughter's age. It was the 30-somethings, the 20-somethings, the teen-somethings. We were talking about generational. Monster High is the perfect example of female generational collector building that most of us have not paid attention to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good to sort of project, okay, what is that next one? I mean, right now, I think we're going to see He-Man coming up big time.
Yep.
You know, the video game stuff, Nintendo has kind of really, you know, took off, especially since Super Mario. But
I'll tell you where everyone's missing right now, and I feel it. I can feel it. And Jesse before the show was showing me Overwatch will be big, but Fortnite is literally king when it comes to a whole generation of kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, there's a lot of that.
Anything Fortnite.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question, Nick. Do you think when you're looking at trends, is it age trends, is it generational trends, or is it demographic trends, or is it all a combination of all 3?
Well, I mean, I still think that the general demographic is the trend, and it still skews older. I mean, the magic that was occurring, you know, at the time when the 80s X-Men Claremont run was going on and was in high, you know, in super high, kicked into drive. And a lot of the books, you know, Amazing Spider-Man at that time, the Todd McFarlane era, that still has a hold on the comic book industry like nothing else. So there has yet to be that change of the guard where that generation, now 40s and 50s, right, and maybe even early 60s to some degree, is still driving a lot of, if we're talking about the secondary market. I mean, I'm assuming that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And is that what you guys see?
Here's the thing, Nick. What I was saying with that Monster High, yes, there is a huge secondary market, but if a company is smart enough, like Mattel is apparently kind of on this, you know, on this level, they will capitalize. Power Rangers has figured this out. You know, they recapitalize on that IP by keeping it solid. And one of the things that that John Tyler Christopher and I were talking about at his house, eating tacos, George Lucas actually didn't capitalize on that. He made no new product from 83 to 99, or 97 if you want to count the special editions. That left a half a generation. If you didn't read comic books and you didn't read Timothy Zahn novels, you didn't get your Star Wars fix. You didn't have a love of Star Wars. Well, whereas, and we were talking about in contrary, Pokemon has never let go. Power Rangers has never let go. There's so many of these people that were so smart enough that even if you, in hindsight, put out a piece of crap product, you kept putting out product.
Well, let's talk about that real quick.
Need to understand.
You brought up the Star Wars thing, and I want to talk about that, especially because we have Nick here who sees the secondary market prices and is constantly reminded of them. that's one of the things that has so surprised me over the last year is the complete fall in prices on the secondary market of Star Wars books. It's unbelievable to see these books drop. I mean, 70+%, like Ahsoka, the Thrawn book, all these major keys, all these books that everybody was specking on and calling the darlings of the speculation world are just completely dead right now.
Well, I think that collectors really want studios to stay as close to the original and the story rote by rote as possible. So when something deviates, which, for good or for bad, it's something that harms the secondary value on the secondary market, which, makes sense. But there was also, that initial excitement when, what was it? It was, I don't remember what year it was, if it was 2020 or 20, no, it must have been 2018.
2019. No,
well, 2018 and 19, where San Diego Comic-Con, they had
and
all
they
of those
just
announcements.
rolled out this Armageddon level event.
Right.
Yeah.
So that type of, you know what it's like in a movie when something really gory and nasty happens sort of off screen and leaves it to your imagination. The what your mind creates is worse than what they could actually show you on screen. So when people get all this information, like there's going to be, all these, TV shows and movies, their imagination starts to think about everything that they love about these properties. And if they're not delivered everything that they love about these properties, it's going to affect the demand of those particular issues.
Can I give you an example on that?
Of course.
And this is what got me. Kit Harington, Selma Hayek, Angelina Jolie. Holy shit, you got those three for Eternals? Yes, and we're going to put them in the worst costumes ever. And we're going to give them the lamest direction ever. And you will not enjoy a single one of those performances. Oh, okay, cool. That would explain why Eternals 3 is now worth $10 again.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to have, and that's a problem with Marvel, Marvel Studios. They did too much. They know it. It's not like I'm saying something that, has no weight in the actual what is happening in the business, because if everything was as good as they say after a series is over, like She-Hulk or whatever, you would see them continue on as they've been going. But they're overhauling everything and they're trying new things. And, this Deadpool Wolverine movie is really going to kind of define what's going to happen moving forward in our hobby, but also in what I think happens in the world of pop culture entertainment in terms of movies and what these companies do.
Well, if it does the billion it should do, it's going to I think it'll
invigorate,
it's going to re-steer it. Like, we cannot go this far off the plantation again.
Yeah.
We have to do this as many times as we can do.
Yeah.
The one thing when you talk about, you could call it an overinflated price, but it starts off at that stability price. So if something is overinflated and goes back to stability, is that still okay as far as the market goes, or is it still going to go by that overpricing?
And that's the misconception, because I think that, a lot of people are looking at sale prices today against 2020 and 2021, which is, it's like looking at, your workout results after doing, a massive amount of steroids. It just doesn't really make sense, right? So if you look at, pick anything. We could look right now, pick any key issue and look at it versus 2018. The majority of key issues that sold.
New Mutants 98.
Yeah, New Mutants 98. Well, that one's such a flux book just because of Deadpool having sort of a constant, presence. Right. But let's look up, some of from 2019 the sales.
Here's
So in 2022, it was selling for, in 2021, it was selling for around 2K on average. 2020 was somewhere in the neighborhood of 800, and then you had 2019 where it was selling in the,
500-ish.
Yeah, like the $600-700 range, and now it's selling. You can't buy it for under $1,200.
Right.
So I mean, that book is not down. If you
and
away,
here's the best part about that book. That book has been so contentious with collectors that somebody created a web page back in like the mid-teens saying New Mutants 98 is not rare. Like, it was like a whole like trashing of that book. And yet it still has had, why? Because there's one person in charge of Deadpool, and that's Ryan Reynolds, and he refuses to compromise on that character. So anyone who's a fan and anybody who bought in rarely dumps because they support that book, because they support that property.
right? And sure, maybe it's not rare, but you have a legion of Deadpool fans. So if there were 250,000 issues printed at the time, you might be able to consider it rare. I mean, it's impossible for us to really get a handle on supply and demand. But, 9/8s in 2024 alone, 123 9/8s have sold, recorded. I mean, we're talking about what we can actually, confirm, not what sells at conventions or what sells on Instagram or whatever. But, if that continues, at the end of the year, that's 240 9/8s that are sold, which is higher than 2023, 2022, 2021. So the demand is still strong.
Right. But I think the outlier there is people that collected New Mutants at the time were sequential buyers. So every collection we buy has a New Mutants 98.
Yeah.
Where now, when we buy a collection, it might only have a New Mutants 98 in it and a New Mutants 87 in it. So I think when you compare the 90s, the 90s sales to modern, we have two different collectors that are buying there.
Yes.
Right? I don't think anybody in the 90s was saying, oh my gosh, first Deadpool, I gotta have that book.
Oh,
they were, oh no, I need a 98 to keep my run going.
No, back in 2008, only 61 9/8 sold. So we're looking at, 4 times the amount that are being purchased per year.
Can I tell you
at a price range that's so much higher?
My story on New Mutants 98 and Deadpool in general? A bunch of my staff members were like, hey, can we get out early? Because we have to go wait in line over at GameStop. And I'm like, what the hell are you waiting? They're like, oh, Marvel Ultimate Alliance comes out. And I was like, oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah, leave. And they come in the next morning like, where's our Deadpool books? And because Deadpool was a starting character on that show, and it was a full week of kids in the 18 to 25 demographic buying up Deadpool. And they were literally they were dollar books. They were in my dollar boxes. So I had to cull out some dollar boxes, start looking these up on eBay. And
synergy.
The book just started,
synergy,
and you were just seeing these books ticking up all over eBay. And you're like, okay, there's something with Deadpool now.
Right.
And that's when we started digging through and pulling out first Deadpools.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's also interesting to me is I think, and Jesse, you were kind of hitting on it, I think that the regular comic book collector that we used to know is no longer there, right? And what I mean by that is over the pandemic, we saw such a big influx of new collectors in not just comics, but sports cards and trading card game stuff, video games, because people needed something to do because they were bored. And the influx of all these collectors changed from being that sequential reader to a cover collector and a key collector, right?
Right.
I wonder what son of a bitch app fucking made everybody into that monster.
I will take credit for that. But look what happened. I mean, look at the 1990, look at when Superman, Death of Superman came out, and look at when the whole Image, when Image barreled through the industry, you had guys coming in buying, long boxes of premiere issues. So it's a cyclical thing that and some people stick around, and I think that's actually good for the industry, because there are some people who might come in for reasons that are financial, or they get caught up with the hype, but then they get their, they find a place in this hobby that actually means something to them.
Yeah. But also,
I mean, I think most people get into the hobby that way, in a sense where how movies drove most, I mean, in 1989, Batman, how many comic fans came out of that? I mean, you guys were, I don't know if you guys owned a store, but Dennis, how old were you?
I didn't own a store then. I didn't own a store then. I was still a fanboy. But every store owner I ever talked to about that event. And it's where they first saw what I now refer to as needle moving events.
Okay.
And they rarely ever happen. Batman the movie was a giant first needle moving event. Because it was kind of
No.
Okay, what was the first
I think
one,
it
Jesse?
was because it was for me. That was the thing that got
That
me
was
into
mine
comics.
too, Brian.
Yeah.
Me
too.
The most known item to hit international recognition in
Hold on. Don't say it. Don't say it yet. Wait, let's try and guess. Walking Dead? Walking Dead?
No. Oh, no. You're talking about in the 80s.
We're talking 80s?
Back to the 80s, right? Pre-85. What was the number one most surprise comic book to come out that sold out?
Dark Knight Returns?
Nope.
Dark Knight.
Watchmen.
Keep in Marvel.
Wolverine.
There is a big change of character in a major title, and they went from your traditional character to an intergalactic character.
Intergalactic? Traditional?
In the 300s.
We're not talking Spider-Man.
Thor?
Okay.
What?
Thor, yep. There you go, Thor. What issue?
Beta Ray Bill?
No, Yep. 337 was the first comic that hit international news. Everybody ran to every single 7-Eleven. And
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven, because that was our eBay rack at the time. And that was the first book that actually moved in value based on the comic book base. Now, keep in mind, we didn't know prices till the end of the year when the Overstreet went. So
right, but Jesse, I don't want to argue too deep on this, but Batman had 100 million people see that movie in the summer of '89. There wasn't 100 million copies of Thor 337 that got sold.
Yeah,
but there were a quarter of a million.
But you can rate as many books as you want. It's all about what sells out.
Right, but you remember that cover? I think it was either late '89 or early '90, where the Joker is sitting in that chair in the ripped up outfit in the shadow, whatever that Batman came out post '89.
Wearing the purple suit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a $250,000 sale book.
That's wild.
And that I talked to retailers. That book was a huge boon because the people who '89 created to start coming into comic stores reciprocated with, oh, is this another story about what happens to the Joker next?
Well, one of the things
that's what I'm talking about, a needle moving event.
Yeah.
Yes, Thor 337, brilliant book, moved the needle, but the needle was so restricted on what it could do, even internationally. But '89 opened up. I mean, I'm going through a collection of Batman '89 stuff right now, and there's Japanese books, there's French books, it was international.
That was crazy.
Huge.
One of the things that I'm seeing, which is very interesting right now, which I think is a good thing personally. I don't know how good it is for the hobby or the industry. I think it should be good. Is one of the things that you're talking about, Jesse, where just based on the comic book alone, not any outside forces or anything, the comic book is starting to sell well. Is a book, Nick, you have on your trending 20, and one of my favorite books of the year or imprints of the year, and that's Geiger and the Ghost Machine stuff that Jeff Johns is doing over his imprint and image. I mean, this is a perfect example of people reading something. They're enjoying the story, which is very rare in comics these days, to have a person read something and enjoy it, and it's moving the needle in the secondary market, which is crazy to me.
Well, and what's really unique is that people are actually getting into the world of Geiger. So it's not just one issue. It's not just, they're interested in, I think that's the hardest thing to do in comics right now. I mean, for any publisher to come in and try and build like a universe, and Image is successfully doing it, yes, with properties that already exist and have a fan base, but this Geiger is a good example too. And to some extent, I don't know, they sort of lost the thread on Radiant Black, but that seemed to be going in a direction as well. And I'm not sure if
But Nick, and see, here's what I love asking you these questions, because you're literally a reader, and
Batman 450, by the way, is the one with him in the
what month was that? What month was that?
It was 1990, so it was the year after Batman came out.
Right.
What month? It was July.
Okay, so it took him almost a full year to get that out, but I've talked to retailers, said that was a huge needle mover for him.
Well, it was July, but it probably came out in
April, May,
April, something like that.
So my question to you is, when you see these, that one, and they made. I wish I knew the print run on that, but I want to say it was like 500,000 total, including newsstands. It was a huge
probably
book.
Crazy, yeah.
And, damn it! I just lost what I was saying. What did?
Well, that's
we were talking about Radiant Black. I mentioned Radiant.
Oh,
Black.
yeah. So, do you think, because you read a lot of these and you understand these books, you understand it from a reader standpoint as well as from the monetization that you do off of it from the website? Do you think Image has a little bit of the boy who cried wolf, though? They make these grand statements of like, what's the kid that has the trouble? Everyone loves him.
Donny Cates?
Donny Cates.
Yeah.
Donny Cates has this new series. It's gonna expand across Marvel, DC, Image, all the universes. What was that? Crossover, was it?
Yeah,
crossover?
Crossover.
It was called Crossover.
Crossover. And then it's just like, and then it finishes up and everybody's like, well, that was a letdown. Fuck.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
then it's like, oh, now you got to get in on this book. This is going to be the most earth-shattering independent comic book ever. But then Geiger just kind of came in and with consistency. We had the guest on, and he did the book with Tim Seeley that didn't pick up. It was Tony Fleeks.
Tony Fleeks, yeah.
Tony Fleeks did that book with Tim Seeley. What was it called?
Local Man.
Yeah. And when I was talking to Tim Seeley, they were like, yeah, nobody cared about this book. But then it got into the first trade, and then it got into the issues after the trade, and now it's finally picked up. And those are I think you have to pay attention and kind of tag them on the ear so that we can follow the books that the little engines that pick up steam after the fact, and not necessarily hype on the ones that Image is hyping for us.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have to do that, right? With their books, it's like they have to say this is going to be the greatest thing ever. Because, I mean, talk about the industry of comics. I find it fascinating that, every week there's like a new publisher that's putting something out. I mean, so a lot of people talk about, oh, comics are down. Nobody cares about comics anymore. Well, there's still like 1,500 different issues that come out per month. Maybe 1,200. Somewhere more than 1,000. That's for sure.
Yeah,
that come out per month.
And
individual stories from
and they all want to get a tag on your app.
Of course,
so
right.
They plug in a new character. They plug in a new writing team.
Sure, and the key is that these books we're ordering 60 days ahead of time. So it's not just that they come out that day. We're trying to make these equations 60 days out. You got 3 weeks to adjust your order before the item comes out. So you got a little bit of play there. But it is a challenge to go from A to Z, right? Because one thing I do tell people, and now it's changed over the year, but traditionally what you do is you buy your Marvel, your DC, your Image, and then whatever budget you have left, that's for everybody else.
And that's why Marvel and DC try to clog up as many new books and reprints and stuff, because they know that by the time it trickles down, these upstarts aren't going to be able to take too much away from
Let's
them.
talk about that.
As far as shelf space goes,
Yeah,
is what you're referring to.
Let's talk about that, because one of the things that Marvel and DC are doing that I cannot stand, and that is these facsimiles, right? The facsimiles are one of the worst things in comic books, in my opinion, especially when they're starting to do variants on them. It feels like the biggest cash grab, and it feels so cheesy. I don't understand why they keep doing it. And do people buy them? I mean, you guys let me know.
Disclaimer, Dennis was the first one to ask for a variant on a facsimile, and it was very successful. But I agree. Ultimate Fallout 4, we did the dessert.
All right. Okay.
So, I mean, do you see those facsimiles ever trending up in value on the secondary market, Nick? I mean, how many are they selling? Lots of copies?
Not now where it's gotten to. No, I mean, you see some like Hulk #1, if it came out maybe 6 or 7 years ago and it was kind of, nobody really paid attention to it. You'll see some of those in high grades going decently. But as far as like Infinite Crisis #6 or Crisis on Infinite Earths #6, who cares?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You could still buy that book in a dollar bin. You could, anywhere. And so, I really don't understand what I'm sure it's cheap because they don't have to pay anybody, artistic, writer, anybody, so they can just, it's the cost of printing. Yeah. And then I'm sure that they can make some money off of it, but it's
not
so
even a cost
cheap.
of printing, because there's zero cost into it, because the retailers have already placed a non-refundable order.
Yeah.
It's just a profit-making machine.
Right.
Well,
No, I think that what you guys have to look at is the bigger picture. If a new customer comes in and he's a Hulk fan and he wants to collect Hulk, he's going to have some stumbles here and there. So when he says, "Oh my gosh, I was able to afford 150 through 179 and 183 up," and he's looking at these big numbers that he might not be able to get for 10 years. He has that big availability to get that reprint now. And number one, by adding that extra name that starts with an F that I can't freaking say, it's just a reprint, right? So we've done this forever. We've always done reprints. So by changing a name, that's what they're kind of bank on. But for the traditional comic book fan who buys these, and I sell a galore of them, is the person that can afford to pay $4,000 for a book can get it for $5.99.
Well, and that's,
you can't say facsimile, like literally.
It was even better than
that,
though.
Whatever.
It was even better than that back in the 80s, though, guys, because we all remember Marvel Tales. And I mean, at that time, Ramita and Ditko back issues were still in the $20 to $40 range.
But didn't Marvel Tales have a backup story at least in each one?
Occasionally, yeah.
And new
backup
covers,
stories and different covers,
which they're trying to do right now with the variants.
No, the Ramita cover for Spider-Man 40 was literally just a complete swipe of,
but a different color.
Whatever the Marvel.
They did different colors on those
they
Marvel Tales,
colors, yeah.
And they also,
but
I mean, those are known for the McFarlane covers and the Adam Hughes covers where they redid the covers. Yeah.
Marvel Tales. Right.
It feels just like such a cash grab. And you know what else is a cash grab to me? These red band issues, right? And here's why. Let me tell you why it's a cash grab to me, because we already know that the vast majority of comic book readers and collectors are adults. Just put the story in you don't have to call it red band. You don't have to call it nothing. But here we are where these red band issues are showing up, and they were the cat's meow for the longest time. And now they're starting to fall, right? I mean, these stores are saying, "Oh, issue number 1 and 2 of Blood Hunt went crazy. The red band editions, they're still trending up, but they're not selling anywhere near those first ones
variants.
sold."
All variants come out of the gate. And that's the other thing. The variant, any variant that sells for like 125 ratio that sells for $50. in a year it's going to sell for, $18, $15. I don't know if it's just the demand missing. I don't know if there is an Illuminati of comic book industry collectors that are trying to boost the value of certain things while they have inventory of it. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that going on, market manipulation.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, the whole variant thing, I mean, we are still, I thought by now that the whole variant and the exclusive thing would be something that kind of petered out, but it just seems to be even more intensely available than ever before.
But Nick, do you find, just in your experience and with your data points, that when people care less about the story, they get more invested in the cover spec and the variant spec? And
less and less now. I think that was the case during that time when we were talking about the Cates era, when, people were buying like the second print of Thor because it was, the Black Winter,
right.
Things like that were just going bananas. But now I just don't think that there's that type of collector anymore. I think that we are looking more at the collector who is interested in the character, who loves the characters, who's, I think we're back to a certain purity.
You know what killed
that?
Exclusive variants. Retailer exclusives, I think, is killing the variant game in such a big way. People are finally starting to get hip to the fact that
it's sell though.
Yeah. Not all of them,
Yeah,
though.
well,
People like the artists, people follow the artists. I don't necessarily get it, right? And it drives me crazy because it's such a massive amount of things to deal with in the app. So there's two things. But I do have some kind of a curiosity of what could happen in 20 years, because comic book collecting, a lot of it is based on scarcity or value, increased value. We see a lot of later run in a popular series, like let's say Ghost Rider 1990, where some of the later issues go for, $20-$30 because there was less interest in the series as it ran its course. So people will, are looking for it, and there was less printed. So scarcity, as we know, is something that increases value. Now, is there going to be a time when Delato, let's say the Batman Who Laughs, that has maybe a limited to 500 copies, and there might be some rush on something like that because there's so few? I mean, it would make sense because that's
few.
Yeah, well,
right.
If they could stay away from the controversy of what that's another thing, is that we've encountered so much controversy over the years that it's hard to trust these things.
Yeah.
Right.
And I see a lot of retailers now, which is the smart thing. I know, Jesse, you've been talking about this for a long time, that the smart thing is not to jump on, jump into the retailer exclusive game and jump straight into a DC or Marvel retailer exclusive, because you're going to be stuck with, 1,000 books or 3,000 books rather than, hey, Image will let you do 500. Image will, or, whoever will let you, a smaller publisher will let you do 250. I'm hoping DC and Marvel will start allowing that. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. But
no, they don't gatekeep this stuff, and they need to gatekeep it.
Yes,
it's their responsibility, but they are being irresponsible.
Yeah, it's the Jeff Goldblum quote. You saw someone else do it, and you didn't ask if you should. You asked if you could, or whatever the quote is.
Well,
I didn't ask for permission. Ask
for
to say you're sorry or whatever, right?
Sure. And Nick, you can probably answer to this. If you want deep dive into it, when we talk about exclusives, how many of those are local comic book stores, and how many of those are sellers, right? So people that don't have comic book stores, and it's that where that overinflation comes from.
I would say there's a lot more non-brick and mortar stores that are selling exclusives than actual brick and mortar stores.
Right.
For sure. And really, how they're doing it, I just don't.
Well, brick and mortar stores have to buy the other 99% of the comic books that come out that month and don't have
Right.
as much money to just, but these guys could focus on, oh, this is a number one with 10 different ratio variants, and it's got to have a
team
first
up with
appearance
other
character.
retailers.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But, but at the same time, look at, let's say, Ivan Tao's Instagram. I don't know what his Instagram is. I don't know how many followers he has, but he does a lot of exclusives. Are these people that follow him as an artist, is 10% of the people following him buyers of his covers, regardless of what it is? You know what I mean? Let's see. Look at it. I mean, those are all pretty much exclusives right there.
They're all
pretty much
have the same thing. Yeah. I mean,
they're
they're homaging themselves immediately. And
it's kind of chintzy.
Well,
man.
it's like and I'm not trashing on them, but it's like when Tyler Kirkham made that
20 followers.
5th variant where it was just like guy standing, shoulder cut with blood, with bloody variant. And it's just like, okay, I get it, Tyler, but I kind of think you're a better artist than to put every character you're doing a variant for in the exact same pose, normal, bloody, and super bloody.
Right. Well, he's a big one. Okay, what's his following? Because maybe Ivan Tao isn't a great example because he doesn't have much of a Instagram following.
146,000.
146. So if he has, it doesn't take much to have a look at Brian Polito. I mean, how many people are collecting Lady Death? I mean, you look at his Kickstarter, and he might have 2,000 people funding it, but he's making $350,000 on a Kickstarter. So the point I'm trying to make, as far as these exclusives go, is it doesn't take that many buyers to make it successful or to create demand, and it doesn't take just people who are trying to make a buck on it in the as a resale later down the line. It's people that might just be that art collector of comic books from a particular artist.
Right. And the one thing I've learned, I've done over 400 exclusives, is a good portion of your buyers are buying it to support you.
A great
right?
point.
So you have your legacy buyers. I've always had legacy buyers. I have about 300 legacy buyers that will buy everything Just James Comics puts out before it even comes out because they know I'm going to give them a good product. They're buying from a good brand. So I'm really only focusing about 150 to 200 copies I have to sell outright. Obviously, you go on live streaming platforms and sell those, or at conventions. But we're also choosing right, either being Rick and Morty, Bob's Burger, Power Rangers. You can go down that road. So I think there's what you're seeing, the trend this year is it has to be more than the brand on why it's being sold, right? And I think that's where the shift is now you have 1,000 people doing exclusives where, Nick, about 4 years ago, you might have had 50, 60 people
It was like sort of an event in a sense.
Right.
A few years ago, you'd be like, oh, wow, look at this, and it would be something that people pursued. I remember when there was Adam Hughes, I think, did a Sabrina cover, and it was really cool, and it looked great, and it sold so fast. But those days, now it's just, it really does have to be niche to the actual fan of that artist because nobody else is going to see it because there's just too damn much of it.
Well, we're also seeing a big change in how those exclusives and who are selling those exclusives, right? I mean, the artists, rightfully so, in my opinion, are getting in on that game and saying, hey, I'm a retailer too, so I'm going to create my own online retail store and I'm going to sell my own exclusive retailer variants. You see John Tyler Christopher doing that. You see Adi Granov doing that. You see Scotty Young doing that. J. Scott Campbell. That to me is a little bit more respectable than, and don't get me wrong, I have a ton of great friends that are retailers, online retailers only, non-brick and mortar guys that are in the exclusive game, but it's a little bit more respectable to have that artist reprint his famous cover and foil it and sell it rather than some grifter on a online selling a platform or a live sale putting out a new ripped off cover from back in the day. And
you just lost all your retailer online.
Yeah, all your retailer. Well, and I want to make one point real fast. Imagine our industry, Nick, Dennis, Brian. Let's just say the last 3 years, if we took all those exclusives and variants out from non-retailers, where would the industry be now? Right? We wouldn't have those sales, even though a lot of them are loss leaders. Right?
Well, and I wanted to bring up two specific books that have had a retailer roller coaster or a secondary roller coaster ride. The first is Daredevil 258. Is that first Frank Miller writing?
No, 158.
158. That book was a holy grail forever. I want to say it was a good 30-year holy grail. Like, if you loved Frank Miller's Daredevil, you had to own that book. And that book spiked among all others, except for First Elektra, First Bullseye, Death of Elektra, spoiler alert.
Are you talking about the first work of Miller? Is that the Mr. Fear? Is that yeah, right there.
158 is the first Daredevil.
Yeah,
first Frank Miller on Daredevil in Daredevil.
Right.
Because he had that 3-issue run,
Spectacular Spider-Man,
that then led to him getting this story. So this book was a holy grail. It's worthless now.
Yeah.
Because it's not a key if it's not the first appearance of somebody or whatever. And the second one that I liken to that book is Scott Snyder's Batman, #1, New 52. That book at one time was a $100 raw.
Yeah.
$200 9.8. Now, sure, the 1 in 200 had a giant spike at one point, the black and white version of this. But the Ethan Van Sciver 1 in 10
75.
or 1 in 25,
1 in 75.
you couldn't give away for anywhere near what this book was going for.
Yeah.
It still does well, though. I mean, for a book there were probably 1 million copies printed of that. I mean, we could easily look up.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for it going for $25-$30, I would say that's still a pretty solid.
No, but to take a hit like that, look
at Punchline. I mean, I definitely think, when there is a certain, Punchline was one of the most disappointing, right? I mean, they didn't they could not get that character right. And hopefully they will one day. But that was something that had the earmarkings of just a great value book, almost maybe even in the same vein as NYX3 with Laura Kinney's first appearance. I mean, saying, well,
how's Tosin holding up right now?
It's still a $20 book, right? And I think that the variant is probably still $125.
Why, yes, it is.
Off the top of my head. And that's not bad. I mean, for something to be a $20 book that was printed in, 35,000 copies, 40,000 copies, I mean, I'd be happy if I bought that off the shelf. I wouldn't be happy if I bought it for $80.
Or the 800 that it was going for the week it came out.
Well, but then again, you look at something like that and you say, okay, what aspect of market manipulation and internal hype of certain groups, there's a lot of private groups where these guys hype stuff up, are the people that are at the head of these groups guys that are actually looking out for their members, or are they using that group as sort
Brian,
of a faux
unfiltered?
Unfiltered, here we go.
Yo, let's do this.
Valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
All right, Dennis, let's
let her rip.
Nick, I have to believe that all of these, and let me just spell it out too. I'm sure everybody loves their particular little group that they're in, their spec group and their little Discord and all this shit. But there's a bunch of these guys that want to be middlemen controllers. And they want to command their army to gobble up these books, certain books. They have to be contacting you regularly, going,
no, not anymore. I mean, back when the app really started to get some traction, I would say that the reaction from people who were at the head of these groups that were, pushing all their followers to buy this and buy that and really hyping up books that it's going to be reselling for so much, they hated what Key Collector represented because we're not the app. Despite what anybody says, there's no reason at all for us to hype anything up or to increase the value of something. For, if anything, there's a certain amount of discernment in terms of what I see values going for on eBay, and then the value of what we put the book at in its temporary status. Because for doing this for so many years, that price is going to plummet.
Yes.
On something. On a 1/100 that comes out of the gate at $200, it's like, that next week it's going to be $150, and then by the end of the month it's going to be $80, and next year it's going to be $15. Okay, for the most part, there's definitely that's not the case for everything, but 90%, 95%, right? Yeah. But those groups that have either crawled into dark places that we're unaware of, or have completely disbanded were groups that were not favorable about what Key Collector represented, because we would call out shenanigans when we saw them.
Well, the Spawn. What was the Spawn issue that you were part of?
It was the
NetherRealm.
NetherRealm one. Yeah. So like 2 years ago, and I did a bunch of internal research on that, reaching out to McFarlane's camp and reaching out to people who were talking about it on YouTube. And I just right away, I'm like, this is there's something going on with this. And sure enough, a year later, it blew up in terms of what was getting graded. And
did we ever find out who that guy was that found all those?
I don't think so. I think I'm not exactly sure. At that point, it was, we had already put our stamp of disapproval on it. Mm-hmm. And then a year later is when it kind of, the rest of the market sort of started to see the same thing that we had already put out there. So but there's a lot of stuff like that has happened even in the short amount of time that Key Collector's been around, since 2017. It's just, there's so much scamming going on in comics. It really is a shame. I think less maybe over the past, maybe in 2024, I think a lot of people are getting scared to do some of the scamming stuff, especially after the whole CGC reholdering thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I think people just know, hey, you're going to get caught. Like, you're going to get caught.
Especially with the internet, because the internet has become the most, it has become the best detective agency
Self-policing.
in the world. Self-policing, yeah. And you
it's
brought up
people like Swaggle House and Sticky Goose and, a lot of these YouTubers that want to dive in and do actual investigative reporting.
Yeah.
And shout out to all those guys.
Well, I want to shout out Automatic Comics real quick because, he's been really hitting hard this CGC 9.9 thing. And that's another very interesting thing to bring up in this show, because it's been within the last half year that this has really hit CGC, coming out and saying they're going to start. There was talk about, in that YouTube show with on West Coast Avengers and with 9.9 Newsstand about how there might be, CGC was talking about a 9.9 pre-screen thing. It hasn't ever happened, but what has happened is a massive uptick in 9.9 I'll call it non-modern books, non-new printing books, right? You have that huge amount of Wolverine #1, the Frank Miller, where you had, 10 9.9s and a 9.10 show up in one week. Now you have that, I think it's the first appearance of Mr. Sinister with like new
221.
221 or something like that. There's some new book that have hit 9 or 10 9.9s just hit the census. What is going on? I mean, that has to be brought up to CGC, Matt Nelson, whoever else that needs to talk about it. Somebody needs to come out and says, hey, this is why it's happening. Either we've changed our grading standards, we're seeing people hold on to, sending us. What is causing this? Do you guys have any ideas yourselves? What's causing this huge uptick in these older 9.9s? Go ahead, Dennis.
we were getting complacent in our purchasing, and we were not making the people who make this money as much money as they wanted to. And at the exact time that a lot of these books were starting to drop, do you think it's coincidence that when these huge books were starting to come down in price, and every YouTuber was, oh my God, the modern market is starting to slip. Oh, the Bronze Age is down in price. That all of a sudden every major auction house has 9.9s and 9.8s of giant keys to sell and get all the headlines?
Yeah, I mean, Brian, I just sent you a link. Have you ever heard of the site cgcdata.com?
No, this is absolutely unreal to me.
Dude,
I'm bringing it up right now.
This is an amazing site. Here, you could share. I just sent you another.
And
link
Automatic
with
Comics
Wolverine
actually showed this on that video.
Oh, did they?
Too.
Okay, yeah, I
They
wasn't
just
sure.
showed it
I wasn't
today
sure
of how
really?
normies like us can use
Well,
it.
that's funny. This is a
Synchronicity, brother.
If you put in, if you put in Wolverine 1, and you click on the 1982, this is a really cool site that could give anybody some clarity on what's going on with graded books on a month-to-month basis. You could drill down into the 9.9s. So you see this Wolverine 9.9. There's 39, and I know that there's a way that you can click on it and you could see when those show the historical CGC census results. Yeah, so if you go up and you look at see right there, show the historical. It'll show you.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at that 9.9 category all the way down, you see 5. Then from December 2023.
You got to
today.
These are all new right here. The blue ones
jumped
right.
12.
But the bigger part is CGC had a ratio, and it's what we've always said. They gatekeep the grades. So for every 100 9.8s, they hand out a 9.9. Every 200 they'd hand out a 10. But now it's like not every 100. It's like every 50 is 2 9.9s. Every 100 is 2 10s. Or whatever that ratio is. That ratio is shrinking on the 9.8s and increasing drastically on the 9.9s and 10s.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys know, but we're writing the monthly market report for CGC now. I don't know if anybody's seen that yet. We just did the first one last month.
No, talk about that, because that's very interesting to me.
It's basically, what.
And why aren't you including CBCS?
Right, exactly. That's what I'm surprised those emails haven't rolled in yet. Well, we're doing it for CGC. We have a partnership where we're sharing we're sending out an email blast, and we have a category that's basically just talks about, there you go. So for example, like what happened in the month, what 5 books are the hottest, and just sort of some snapshots of information, what sold the highest. It's being retooled right now. I really don't like the layout, so it looks a little messy. But just as an aside, I don't want you guys to think.
I like this, man. This is great. Yeah, this is.
There's some cool information. Like what are the top 5 books that are really getting the, and we have some information that we get from CGC in terms of a lot of the stuff that you could see on that cgcdata.com site, just with some of their census data.
But with that being said, that you get a nice check from CGC.
No, we don't get any money from them. I don't take money from anybody.
Okay, but so
it's just cross promotional stuff.
But you're clearly on board with us and saying some of these 9.9s and 10s seem bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a 9.9 and a 10? Like, really? I mean, even in and of itself, what's the difference, right? So you could take 15 of those 9.9s and make them 10.0s, and nobody would even notice.
Well, I heard the one guy say, I dare you to crack that 9.9 and send it to CGC again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no kidding. It's pretty easy to sort of
that's the test. That's
find
the
the
test.
fault in some of this stuff. But you know, CGC is look, what are you going to do, right? I mean, CGC is a service that has been around. They were the first to market, and they're powerful. I mean, they're powerful because they offer something that they offer a sense of security for people, and that sense of security, no matter how objective it is something that the majority of comic book buyers feel comfortable enough standing behind.
Yeah, shout out to Drew of Wanted Comics that says exactly that. He says, CGC moves the needle. CBCS might as well be PGX, dead in the water right now.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. I mean, Dennis,
I still make money.
I know you still make money, but the vast majority of collectors out there are not sending their books to CBCS. That's just the way it is.
Well,
My
if you look at
integrity
that,
is not for sale.
I get that, but a lot of people's integrity is.
yeah, I mean, I have never purchased or sent in a book to be graded. I've never bought a graded book, and I have no interest in it.
Yeah.
I just like to take my books and I like to triple board them, and I like that. That's my version of a encapsulated book. Is
42 years. I've never graded a book either, but
I have no interest in it.
Yeah.
I mean,
let me ask you something, because this is very important. What do you guys think is the percentage of raw collectors and graded collectors? There's got to be a mass difference.
Huge.
Yeah.
There's. I bet there's. Look, I mean, I'm just going to guess.
We'll throw a number out.
I'll say 90% of collectors are raw collectors, if not more.
Yep. Agreed.
I mean, it's kind of, you can sort of get a somewhat of okay, how do we come to that sort of conclusion? Well, if you look at something like GPA or even CGC census, let's say Wolverine #1 might have, I don't know, 5,000 graded books total, or 25,000 graded books total, right? Which is maybe 10% of the print run at that time.
Sure.
So you can just sort of, let's say, estimate, let's say, same thing with Deadpool, might have 10% of those books might be graded. That means 90% of the books aren't graded, and people have them, and they don't.
And
either,
the crazy, the crazy part about that, Nick, is the original buyers aren't the ones traditionally grading those books. Mm-hmm. It's when they sell their collection that the guy goes in and grades that book. So the 60s, 70s, 80s guys, those are just mid 90s. Those are kind of your raw sequential buyers. They have no interest. I can tell you how many collections I've bought over the years, Dennis, you can say the same thing. These guys have no idea what their collection is worth. They walk in and say, I'm done collecting. I have 20 long boxes. What will you give me? They don't say, oh, I have.
Those are the guys, but Jesse, those are the guys I love doing the Post-it note game with, where I say, write down on this Post-it note what you think I'm going to give you, and I'm going to write down what I want to give you.
That's funny.
I almost always beat their number by triple or quadruple.
By far.
Really?
They've gone to other comic stores, and other comic stores are shit on their collections.
Well, that's also because you have integrity. That's why. Listen, you guys, if you guys don't think that these two guys have integrity, you're not going to see somebody on this show or on this channel that I don't think has integrity unless I tell you they don't have integrity. And all these guys on here, I think, have integrity. I wouldn't be doing the show otherwise. That's the difference.
Right.
Is I've seen Jesse give more money.
Jesse and I wouldn't be on this show if we didn't think you had integrity, Brian.
There you go. I've seen Jesse do that, exactly that. Somebody walks in with a collection, and me and my buddy Kyle are sitting there talking to each other. How much do you think Jesse's going to offer? What do you think this guy's going to get? And we walk over there, and it's absolutely crazy that the difference in what we expected and what is happening. Those are the type of things that, if you have that integrity in this community, in this hobby, in this industry, will keep you going. The people that don't have that integrity, they'll get found out. The light will hit them, right? And they'll get found out. They'll disintegrate in that light eventually. And behind the scenes, people talk in the industry just as much as they talk in the collecting community about these people that don't have that integrity. That's very important.
And let me forthcome with this little fact, because I love to throw this out, and everybody's like, oh, Dennis, you just you just love CBCS because they give you good grades or whatever. You're the only one that, dude, they don't even know who I am.
There's
after
always a
Steve Borak
reason.
left.
That's the thing, Dennis, is if there's something that you do, there's always a reason, right? That's and understandably everybody should be on guard.
But with full disclosure though, I got a 9.9 and my first ever 10 from CBCS, but they were such cherry books that were like laser cut. It was like a leather bound Evangeline that I got a 10 on, and it was like a double impact like leather book. And I'm like, well, if I got a 9.9 and a 10 on anything, it was these books because they were literally hand cut with lasers, 15
Well, that's
years
new
ago.
printing. That's another thing we should talk about. I have no problem seeing 9.9s and 10s on new books. And what I mean by that is the printing process has changed immensely, right? You see
cardstock.
Yeah, cardstock. Whoever
But it doesn't
Skybound and
explain how
Image is
giant
using.
size. It
No,
doesn't,
it doesn't.
explain
You're
how a
right.
giant size X-Men #1 with 5 different grader notes on it got a 9.9.
You're right. That's the problem, and
Get
that's
the
what we
fuck
need.
outta here.
That's what we need CGC to come out and tell us. Because here's the problem: like Nick said, CGC is the top dog, but they're slowly losing the respect and what people think about their integrity because of things like this. And
they're
none
going
of
to
us
be left
want
with
that.
the scammers. They're going to
Yeah.
be left with the scammers and the money changers and the people who want to gouge the customer base and scam the customer base. I mean, if the auction houses if it's ever discovered that the auction houses have a side deal with these guys,
Game over.
the amount of lawsuits, the pile of class action lawsuits that come after them is going to be staggering.
Hey,
So-
you mind if I change topic for a
Of
second?
course.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because we are talking about halfway through the year, and I'd like to get it from your perspectives as sellers. Because I'll talk to some stores. I'll talk to Gotham City Comics in Arizona
Shout out to them.
and some
I
other,
love
and
them.
say, hey, okay, so what is the surprise? Let's say independent hit for you. Is it Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees? Is that the biggest surprise indie hit that you guys have seen this year?
Yes.
Or is there something else that has
100%.
right?
Yeah.
100% that.
No, I think for us, the trending part, you got to look at sales as a whole. You can't just say, well, I ordered 10 and I sold 10. That's not
Sure.
trending at all. So if you look at Beneath the Tree, yeah, I can order 10, 20, 30 and sell out of that, but I'm still going to sell 120 Thundercats.
No,
Yeah,
this
five-
is the
five
surprise.
spec-
You think
that's what I'm talking
Thundercats is
about.
the surprise?
That's what I'm talking about, Jesse.
Yeah.
Is the surprise hit to me was Nikki Barucci and Thundercats.
That's a great point.
Absolutely, hands down, unbelievable. And then I'll only say it because it's technically a year old, but it hasn't launched. Everything Skybound is doing. I mean, to me, the surprise hit was what, $5 million for a G.I. Joe reprint book?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we're getting into that two things here, which, one that we really need to talk about, and that's crowdfunding. I mean, this crowdfunding.
Is that what you're talking about? The Kickstarter G.I. Joe
Yes.
Yeah.
omnibuses?
What did it close at? What did it close
I'll
at?
bring that up. I can't believe how
Last time
well.
I saw it was like 2.5 million, I think.
Oh
Yeah.
no, it was over 3.5.
Was it?
like,
No.
2 weeks going out. Yeah.
No, it was like 2.3 million on the.
Okay.
Here, I'm bringing it up right now.
It should be 3.6 or something like that.
Here we go.
3.7.
3.7. So yeah,
That's
it came close to
3.7.
4.
Yeah, getting close to
Yeah.
4. You're right. You're
But
right,
that's-
Dennis.
But
But
that's
here-
a reprint. It's literally a volume of reprints. Is it 1 through 155?
Yeah, but the reason why
That's-
it's so
that's
high is also
Yeah.
because of what they did with the Energon universe, right? If they
Right.
would have put this out before the Energon universe explosion and how well Joshua Williamson and Daniel Warren Johnson and the guys over at Skybound are
Yeah, that's a good point.
rolling that out, this would have
Yes.
not hit anywhere near that.
That's a good
But
point.
it's what I've been saying on this show for the whole time we've been doing it. It's all about nostalgia. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
You can't ruin G.I. Joe with woke politics or any of that, because you're just doing reprints.
I wouldn't put that challenge out there, Dennis.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, Dennis, real quick, I you brought up Dynamite, Nick Barucci, and I want to throw a quick shout out to them real fast. Always. Because they do have a new Kickstarter that's going on right now for another nostalgic book, Darkwing Duck.
But this doesn't appeal to anybody who's currently walking into the comic book stores.
Not true.
Because they've tried it.
Not true. No.
Hold on. But Brian, pull up
300,000. 300,000.
You're not hearing what I'm saying. Pull up any Comic-Con sale for Darkwing Duck. It's never been anywhere near a needle mover.
Well, it's a needle mover when you crowdfund it.
Yes, because it's not in a comic book store, Brian. That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Okay, I get you.
Here's to my
if
point.
Nicky Barucci had released this to comic book stores, it would have sold 2,000 to retailers, maybe, if not only 1,000.
Well, that's what we're saying. That's how important crowdfunding is to this industry right now. I get it; it's not a big deal to comic stores, but the industry is leaving brick and mortar comic stores behind in the dust. Unfortunately, I think that's very obvious. I think they don't care. I'm not going to say don't care. I think that the money isn't in the comic stores anymore because there's not as many out there. Yeah.
Well, here. Let me just about that Darkwing Duck. To my point earlier, when I said you don't need that many people to make something successful or to make it, you're talking about 2,100 people that spent roughly $150 each.
Yeah,
let's say that's a hell of a lot of money for Darkwing Duck for 2,000 people. And 2,000 people is not a lot of people.
No,
you can generate $300,000 just from that small segment.
So let me ask you this, Nick. When it comes to crowdfunding, is there any value when it comes to Key Collector to even look at crowdfunding?
Absolutely. It's just something that it's a whole other monster to try to, at this point we're still doing some things with pricing. We still got a bunch of different things that we want to do in terms of just unique things that collectors have never seen that will make the app more exciting and make the hobby more exciting and make it more connective. But in general, yeah, absolutely.
So how does a Kickstarter trend on the second market, I guess is my question to you.
That's tough to say because again, the problem with it, in my opinion, is there's so much it's so advantageous for a creator to get that book reselling in the secondary market for a higher amount than it should, and that's a concern. It's a concern for me. Like, look what happened.
It's all about supply and demand, though, Nick.
Absolutely, but look what happened with that one comic. What was it? I always forget the name of it. With the redheaded chick that was like she was
Battle
fighting
Chasers?
zombies. No, it was like 4 letters. It wasn't Rust. Damn it. Oh, I always forget it. Came out like 5 years ago.
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? It's driving me crazy now.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
They
reprinted the same cover and then they went down. Yeah. Chat will let us know.
Out the name
my knowledge of Kickstarter aftermarkets.
Rags.
What? Rags. That was it. Rags.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, DT.
My knowledge of Kickstarter aftermarkets is HasLab. And I spoke endlessly to people about what I knew HasLab was going to do and why I invested in it. That first job as sail barge, I'm like,
why don't you give a little more context to what you're talking about?
Okay, so HasLab is Hasbro's Kickstarter, internal Kickstarter. You pay for the toy today, we'll make it, but because there was this huge history of the fans saying, will you please make a 4-cockpit Millennium Falcon? And Hasbro makes a 4-cockpit Millennium Falcon. And all of a sudden, all the fans are like, well, I'm not going to pay $250 for that.
That's funny. What did it go for?
Hold on. I'll give you the backstory on this. And then when it clearanced, all the fans bought them all up at $100 a piece. Then all of a sudden, secondarily, all the prices went up to $250 to $400. And then all the fans were like, why don't you make this again? Make it again. We promise we'll buy it this time. And then they released it as a vintage collection Millennium Falcon. And they did the same thing with an AT-AT, and the same exact thing happened. So Hasbro's like, look, we're not coming down when you call Wolf fans.
Whoa.
We're gonna make you pay for this in advance, $499.
And it has to hit a certain amount to them.
But
like
now,
this one had to
open
hit
it up on
5,000.
eBay. Yeah.
5,000 backers.
You have to make 5,000, and we'll give you an exclusive action figure and some extra parts and stuff. What did it end up? How many did it end up funding, Brian? I can't see it there.
This
like
is the sale bar.
It was like 14,000.
2.5 million at least. 5,000. Oh, that's the target. There were 5,000 backers paying $500 each.
Right, but it actually got something like 13 or 14 actual thousand backers.
It doesn't give the actual
Really?
backers, which
so
is
they,
interesting.
it only gives you, because that's kind of minimum.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they
Wait, can
made
you go back
a
up? What
butt ton.
was it? Can you go back up?
But here's
to
the thing: look it up on eBay now.
That's what I was going to do.
They're going for $2,000 to $2,500.
See, but that is not for everything, right? Because the Spawn
No.
the Spawn
Because
Kickstarter the Spawn Kickstarter totally tanked, right? That
No.
Spawn.
No,
Yeah,
that
one sold for $2,000. Yeah, $2,000.
So this is a 5x investment. I've still got, I think, 2 of them left. And I never sold at lost. But when they came in, people were dumping them to flip them, and now 5-6 years later, they've 5x'd their original thing. But not every one of these did this, because they did the Razor Crest, which was Mandalorian ship, and it ended a week before they blew the ship up on the show, and they haven't used it since whatever season that was.
Man, it's amazing how much money is out there.
Yeah.
Buying these for $3,000. And I'm just saying this is one example.
Well, to me,
it's absolutely wild.
That's the hit, right? Because here's the thing, and I think I was talking to Jesse about this, or Dennis, or both these guys the other day, that when you have these Kickstarters, you have a lot of people out there, and it also works with live selling. You have a lot of people out there that maybe don't have the time to go to a comic shop, don't have the time to go into a toy store, don't
even if it's around.
Yeah, even if it's around.
They might not even have one anywhere near them.
Yeah, they're working so much that the only time they have is a quick little check on the internet. Oh, I do want that. I'm going to buy that, right? So that's changed.
Well, we've moved to a Grubhub society.
Yes.
Where Walmart delivers your groceries and Taco Bell's delivered by some beat up piece of shit car.
Speaking of which, I got to order something. Thank you for reminding me.
Brian, can you pull up that link I threw in the group chat? It's Sticky Goose's video from a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're not going to watch
it.
it.
First of all, say I enjoy seeing some of Sticky Goose's content.
I love Sticky Goose. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to follow him right now because I'm not familiar.
He's very what's the word for it? He's very
sticky.
There's some certain things that I don't like about his content, but I'm not going to get into that because overall. But look at the title of this. Can you pause it so we can pull the
best
title
comic book shop of all time is a dump.
This doesn't help our industry, guys. And this is what Jesse and I talk about. Like, that's kind of a backhanded compliment.
Well, it helps his channel, and that's what a lot of these guys do. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying in general.
He's very cynical. That's why I think he's very cynical, and you can tell he's doing this as content, entertainment. It's not just information.
Look at all the guys on Instagram that just.
But if you've got a property, if you're Nicky Barucci, and you've got a property like Darkwing Duck, are you going to wait around for this comic book store to help save your company?
Great point.
Where's he going to put a new Darkwing? Is he going to put it on that stack of shit, or is he going to put it over by that stack of shit, or is he going to put it over on that stack of shit, or is it going to get buried under this stack of shit for 20 years? No, you go to the customers because clearly this isn't where you want your product. Do you think Keanu Reeves wants his comic buried over here?
Right.
You make a good point.
And keep in mind there's one reason for a Kickstarter. They do care about that number at the end, but what they care about is the database they now control. And if you control your database and no longer give it to the distributor, and now you own that, that's huge in financials over the next 5 to 10 years. So if they do $3.7 million and they did that through Diamond, right? They'd have to share.
And you know the transformer volume is coming within the next, I don't know.
Yeah.
They've already
month or
announced
so.
it. They already announced it.
45% of commission. And guess what? Those go to the stores, which means Skybound gets zero customer base retention on this, right? So Kickstarters has, especially this year and probably the last 6 months of last year, trend very well because the publishers have more control of that customer base for future purchases.
Well, and not only that, but that publisher also gets a physical address for every one of their
that's their customer base, right? Exactly.
Right.
So they get that.
And then on top of that, when they launch Transformers, Kickstarter is going to contact everybody who bought G.I. Joe. They're going to have an address to send a postcard about Transformers, or if they have a new G.I. Joe Kickstarter. So it's what Diamond has been trying to do for 15 years, which is get access to Jesse and my customers' names and email addresses and addresses. And Kickstarter has given a backdoor to every publisher, to that information.
Yeah.
And beyond.
It's smart.
Beyond.
Right. But that's Nick's goal, right? Is to grab one more customer to his app, right? And so how do you let's stick on this last 6 months. Where's the trend been for new viewers to your site, and what does your retention look like?
Well, that's kind of hard to use that as any kind of marker for, the industry, just because we've done a bunch of things with our search engine optimization. So we're getting a lot of traffic coming in just because we've improved our search engine optimization, and we're getting, people who are downloading the app that are more closer to the demographic of comic book collector. And we've also added, over the past, I don't even think it's been a year yet that we've added the entire database of comic books where you could turn on non-key issues.
Yes.
And we've been adding things for collectors. So where we really made our name known in the industry was being the first resource pretty much that was solely identifying what key issues are. And now we continue to keep that, but we also want to, have a resource that's easy to use for collectors of comics and however they collect,
Nick,
whether they collect runs or whether they're readers or whether they're into the movies. So we really try to be as embracing as possible for everybody. So that's, we've done really well, and we're going to continue to do things like that. Well,
you've identified the spectrum of what Jesse and I try to talk about, that there are 1,200 comic shops. There are 77,000 people selling comic books, that aren't comic shops. You've identified so many different levels on this that I know what I call the old timers, the 70-year-old old timer collectors that
have their list,
barely have something over a flip phone, but they have Key Collector app.
Well, here's the thing that I love about the app, and I talk about this all the time. I've told Nick this before. You can get lost in this, and one of the things that comic book collectors that's very clear in comic book collecting is niche collectors, right? Yes. There's people that collect, like me, Alien covers, or there's people that collect bondage covers. There's people that collect firsts or origin stories or creator first, right? And one of the greatest things about Key Collector, and this isn't glazing Nick at all, right? I don't mean to sit here and glaze him up, but this right here, this randomizer, you guys, you'll get lost in this. You hit the randomizer, you go find all these crazy facts about all these crazy books, and you're going to find out so much new information that it's going to make you become not only a better collector, but you have this resource to find things that you might have never even heard about. Well,
what I love, I have an employee who is he's very passionate about comic books. He's a great hand salesperson. He does not have my encyclopedic knowledge, even though I screw up and say 258 and when it was 158, but at least I got the 58 part. Because that's more my Alzheimer's kicking in.
Well, but
I can take a 20-year-old, I can take a 20-year-old employee who has a passion for comics and go, here, the store phone has this app. Scan all of these comic books, learn what these are, pick out the key flash book, because I don't know what the post-rebirth flash keys are, and they made so damn many of them, but he can go through a stack of a flash collection and tag first appearance of this, first appearance of the golden flash, and all of this stuff, and he can then price it for me, and I don't have to do that.
Yeah, that's what you need.
How do you identify trend in this first 6 months? What trend has become very fluent?
Well, like I said, I think the nostalgia properties are big right now, and you could see, publishers laying into them. I mean, you have a lot of trading hands over the years where you got, Marvel picking up Conan and Predator and Alien, and then you got Dynamite being pretty aggressive with picking up some of these properties, and then you have.
Well, I was blown away by Dark Horse getting Star Wars back.
Yeah, that was wild. And then you have, I think there's a lot of it. I mean, I can't really say exactly, but then you have.
X-Men 97, Nick, is a perfect example of that nostalgia. Exactly. As soon as this hit, everybody started remembering those great storylines, those great moments in the comics, and boom, X-Men stuff is trending.
X-Men 200 was Jesse, am I wrong? X-Men 200 was $1 book for the last 30 years.
Yeah, it's crazy
or lower.
Now. And just because of that, because of that, that's all it takes. People like to own the origin of where some of these visual dynamics came from, not just first appearances, but even just inspiration. And I think it makes sense. It makes sense that people would want to buy, let's say, that Secret Wars cover that has Dr. Doom's face on it that was in the Deadpool Wolverine, just because you want to feel that much more connected to this thing that you really love. So I have a feeling Brian is going. Do you really?
Yeah.
So I have a feeling Brian's going to get his copy of it.
Is trend visual or is what you calculate?
What do you mean?
So are you reading trend or are you calculating trend? What is the most effective way to figure out trend?
It's examining the secondary market. So it really is more of a, because that's where I think the information pool is as expansive as it is on something like eBay and Heritage and this and that, or the other auction sites, and seeing, okay, what is driving interest on the secondary market, and seeing, I'll go through 100 pages of eBay in a few days, and then I'll do another 100 pages just to get a visual sense. So if that's what you're talking about, to get a visual sense of what's happening in the market. And of course, we also have the data side of it where we are pulling in graded sales from all the different auction houses and eBay, and there's a way to analyze that as well. I actually have somebody that looks at those analytics and puts together a report for me. But in terms of the visualization, that can only be done. I only feel comfortable doing that myself because I have to form
fingerprints on it.
Right. I have to form my own opinion. And I really haven't met that many people in the hobby yet who are able to do that without having preconceived notions or biases for things that they like or things that they like. I think I have a pretty unique ability to shut down all of my biases and desires of what happens in the market, because it's more important for me for the app to be a resource to collectors and have it be as pure as possible. So
I just had to check myself and my biases because I love ElfQuest, and I'm always getting it in 80s and 90s collections. And I gave a spot on my wall, and it's all nostalgia wall. And I'm like, surely we're going to sell some ElfQuest. Put some ElfQuest up there.
No one bought
Let's get some ElfQuest. And the kids that are like, what's an ElfQuest? I go, don't worry, the old people will understand. And 6 months later, we didn't sell a single ElfQuest. And
look, I mean, they announced not that long ago, a month or two, a couple months, that they were going to develop ElfQuest into a TV series.
Yeah,
so
but I think the problem with ElfQuest, and I have a mind blank on the movie that beat him to him. It was with the elves.
Fern Gully. Are you talking about Fern Gully?
No, the Steven Spielberg Hansen one, right?
Yeah,
Dark Crystal.
Right? Dark Crystal beat it to him, and so. But it's funny, Nick, when you say that, and you're talking about everything that you were talking about. What is the trending time? What is the time that you say, okay, it's trended enough? This is something that is, I don't have to really investigate anymore at this point. Or is there a time that you say, well, I'm going to investigate all the time? When is that mark for you?
I mean, I just have a general interest in it from my own perspective, even just to know what's happening in comics as an owner of this app. But as far as timeframes, I mean, you could sort of categorize it on a week-to-week basis because we're really looking at so much data on a weekly basis. If you're saying like in that week, what's the time frame? Well, it's a daily review of what's happening in the market, because something that might be selling at the beginning of the week that should be recognized as something that's selling in the beginning of the week might not be selling at the end of the week, you know? Like when something like Mindset gets optioned or a Vicious Circle gets optioned, that might be 3 or 4 days of sales, or even 3 or 2 or 1 of sales that you see happen on eBay. And then 3 days later, something else pops up in the news, and that's what drives, because when we look at sales, we're looking at it from 1 week, let's say trending. We're looking at 1 week and what occurred, and we're comparing it to the week before. So for a book to qualify, it has to sell, and this is just the way that this particular category works. It has to sell triple-digit percentage above the previous week. So basically, it has to sell more than double the amount that it did the previous week in terms of units. So if it's something like, let's say, X-Men 97 #1, if 30 copies sold this week, but in 15 copies sold last week, well, then that is something that qualifies because it has at least 3-digit 100% increase in units purchased than the previous week. So that and then there's probably some news behind it that is driving that type of additional interest.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that Vicious Circle. Yeah. Because this, and I got to talk about it. I think I got retweeted by Rich Johnston, and I told Ross Ritchie this story. I think we talked about it when he was on the show. I went to the DC or the Diamond Comics lunch at San Diego last year, and in the middle of the panel, the Boom people were like, "Hey, come over to the hotel afterwards. We're going to have Lee Bergero over there. And he's going to be signing Bermejo, whatever." Yeah.
Hey, you told me Caquetto. I got to tell you Bermejo.
You got to correct me once on a pronunciation. There you go. Kudos. And so I'm like, hey, I'm not doing anything. I'm here just to fuck around at San Diego. I don't, but I like Lee, and I like Boom, and I'll go over there. And I walked around. I couldn't find it. I called up Philip Sabic and said, "Hey, where's this at?" He goes, "Oh, it's on the second floor. You got to go up." And okay, got it. I walk in there 15 minutes after the start. It was starting at 1, and I got there at 1:15, and it's just the entire Boom sales team and Lee sitting at this giant board table. And I sat there for 45 minutes, and not one retailer walked in.
Oh, wow.
And it's just me talking to the Boom people about how to sell comic books, and me talking to Lee about his experiences at the end, the last days of DC and the Batwing and the people who took over for the people we all knew and loved. And I got a lot of backstory, but it was but I was the only one there.
Yeah.
And clearly I don't think this book took hold like it was supposed to. It's an oddity, vicious circle. And now a year later, it's the hottest book of the week.
Yeah. Well,
what about pricing?
It's really difficult, right?
Yeah.
It's really difficult to get somebody to get behind, for stores to get behind books. I mean, that's the thing of the marketing. DC, Marvel, they really rest on their legacy characters quite a bit. Their marketing they don't really market comic books. They just send out solicitations to Twitter, comic book sites. I mean, they don't do anything. They don't really put they don't invest in comic books. Right? I mean,
think about what Boom had to do to get there a year ago. They hired Lee Bermejo. They had at least 3 or 4 people from the staff there. They had to probably pay Lee to come in there, but he might have done it comp. They had to pay the hotel for that giant boardroom table. They had water and soft drinks there, etc. Chips, I think.
Water.
Well, yeah, it's thirsty. I get thirsty at San Diego. But they spent all of that money to talk to me, a person who is no longer buying new books.
Well, I mean, they probably hoped that more than just you would be there, but it just didn't turn out that way. So these guys, but I think that a lot of these properties, I mean, think about it. I mean, if you talk to a publisher, somebody from Boom, I don't know, Ross, I guess he's not really the guy that.
Well, that's going to be our next little segment here in a second. But
all right,
I apologize.
Well, I mean, are they creating comics are they rolling the dice on IPs being picked up for movies and TV? Are they hoping that, I mean, obviously they know in a general sense how to make money, but then you also have your core, right? So Image has they have Spawn that they know they're making money on every week or month. They have whatever properties, Walking Dead, all the Walking Dead deluxe, and they have Transformers, they have G.I. Joe, they've added to so they have evergreen sort of properties that have been built up that they know they can, so they know what their profit and loss could be, so they could take a chance on something let's say a Vicious Circle, and maybe it'll be a hit book and maybe it won't, but they've probably already figured out that sort of equation already.
Yeah,
right.
I would imagine. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know, but I know that's how it was. Yeah.
If you watch the Ross Ritchie episode of our show here, Ross had, I think, the most unique way. He was getting into comics to get away from entertainment, but realized because his name was attached, entertainment was going to pay attention to what Ross Ritchie did. And maybe I don't necessarily think chicken and egg.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I said maybe that's just a good story for him to tell, Like,
absolutely. Yeah. You got to take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
But when you see that book is not laid out like a storyboard that appeals to producers.
Sure.
That book is a piece of art. I mean, Lee knocks it out of the park, and every page is like a splash page that isn't a movie pitch, in my opinion.
Well, in the sense there's a visual dynamic to it that's so refined, because Bermejo is an incredible artist, that it might evoke a cinematic vision in a producer's head. It doesn't have to have that really straight storyboard, panel by panel kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, but it could evoke the mood. But somebody like Bermejo is definitely moody. He's definitely cinematic in the way that he does fire and the way that he does, violence. I mean, he's awesome.
Well, he's like Artie Garnov.
Sure. So
I mean, yeah. Artie Garnov, I feel, is more like where Bermejo has a certain gritty realism. I think Garnov has more of like a polished fantasy, like a sort of like almost like a ethereal fantasy to his to his artwork, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
But I mean, when you see what Marvel, MCU, Disney saw in Audie's panel work, Extremis,
Oh, right.
You know, they saw that, and to me, that's why obviously they were like, how much are you getting to do these little funny books? No. You're coming over here and working for us full time, writing every panel for MCU that we're going to have.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, and then you see Lee, and you go, I can't see the producer seeing that exact same, you know, tit for tat analogy.
Right. Yeah.
So my question to you, back on the 6-month trend, what publishers are trending? Who do you think is in the lead right now for half the year? Who's trending the best?
I mean, I would say that, of course, I mean, just from a volume perspective, it's going to be Marvel and DC in terms of volume. But, you know, maybe in terms of...
But volume doesn't mean...
But in terms of... Okay, but in terms of how are we? Because we don't do things by publishers and by 6 months. But so are you saying? Because I could make that.
What publisher in your mind has created the most trending product? So you can say Dynamite has Thundercats, they have XYZ, Marvel has XYZ. What publisher has really come to the dance in the 6 months, not just in total sales, but who has the best brands trending?
I would say that Image is definitely the publisher that has probably generated more new business and new dollars in 2024 than any other publisher.
I'm only going to disagree with you because the production numbers are saying something different. And I mean, I would argue that although Image has a larger slate, I think, and you can't count this new Kickstarter, the 3.7 million in that.
Oh, they're Transformers alone.
Yeah, but the Transformers
and G.I. Joe.
Transformers and G.I. Joe, but where does that compare to
who are you saying
for Thundercats?
Man, don't tell me that you don't have favoritism because you've been
I've called out Nicky Barucci more times than I care to count.
I know. I was going to say you have been
impressed the hell out of me.
You're like the 6th Thundercat. Actually, I don't know how many Thundercats there are, but you kind of look like a Thundercat now that I think about it, right? Yeah, I mean, look, they're doing great. They good. Dynamite, you know, they got Dick Tracy right now. They got Dick Tracy now. They got.
Space Ghost.
Or did
Space Ghost?
Wait, Space Ghost. Who picked up Dick Tracy? Is it Mad Cave?
No, that was a new publisher that picked up Tracy, I think.
And I don't think that's gonna. That's way outside.
Just in terms, right? It is. Yeah, it's nostalgia. If you were getting close to death in the 1970s, right?
Mm-hmm. But I agree with you, Nick. I think Image is 100%.
Yeah, and maybe Dynamite's behind him. I don't want to disagree with you.
Well, pull up that top 20 list. Let's just scroll through it and go over it right now.
Well, right now? Well, this is just for this week. I mean, so it's kind of...
You know, you should actually expand that so that you can look at this week.
We do one at the end of the year, but I like that idea. You know, we got Geiger on there. Again, Image, they're doing really well with what they're doing. But, you know,
Ryan, can you pull it up for everyone?
Yeah. Are you talking about the trending 20 on Key Collector?
Yeah, the trending 20 right now.
Yeah, and you got Proof, Snapshot. Which, you know, it's an older book, but
the top 2 books are the old Image books, but they're there.
Holy shit! I've got cases of that Negative Burn.
Yeah, Geiger.
Why is that on the list? Go back up to that.
Why is Proof and Negative Burn? First appearance of Proof is Negative Burn.
Geiger's on the list. Geiger's on the list because they.
Berserker.
Because that Rook Exodus is doing pretty good.
Yeah,
and they just
All-Star Superman because of the
Superman,
the James Gunn.
Yeah, I mean, this is a unique week where DC is actually
very heavy on the
scales. Yeah, you got Marvel with the Scrooge. They did good with that Scrooge book. I mean, so like we've been saying this whole time, nostalgia is if you want to make a quick buck, buy a property that hasn't been in the public eye for a while, you know? like Terminator. I mean, I put that on Nick's Picks. If you look at my Nick's Picks category, I put Terminator #1 on there. Like, that could use a reboot. Like, hell yeah, that could use a reboot, and it would be a really cool one because, especially with you know, all of the technological fears that we hear all the time in the world today, it's like even more of the threat of a Terminator AI world is. I mean, somebody should take that property and go bananas.
Well, let's talk about AI, because that's a huge.
Oh yeah,
that is a very huge influx in the last 6 months, and in comic books is the introduction of AI, whether it's negative or positive. You know, the response.
Are you gonna admit to your story, Brian?
What's
Brian is actually AI right now. We're not even talking to the real Brian is on mushrooms in his at a rave right now. This is the AI Brian.
What story, Dennis?
The title of tonight's episode.
Oh, that's a great point. I mean, for the first time ever, I utilized ChatGPT to help me with a description and a title for the show, because I couldn't come up with a way to explain midpoint of the year that sounded well, right? I go and hit ChatGPT. I type, "Hey, what's a good a title and a description for a comic book podcast that's talking about, you know, the comic book industry at the midpoint of the year?" And boom, you know, like 6 things came up that are all great choices. And I'm not the first one to do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's many people that have done that. But that, I was telling the guys before the show, it blew me away how easy it was to jump in there and do that. And, you know, I talked about this on a show a few weeks back where the new AI modules and that have become so easy that people are going to start using it for content. I mean, literally, you're not going to have to do anything but type in a few prompts and it'll have a whole show written out for you to talk about, which is happening in comics also, where, you know, Francisco Mattina is being ostracized by his peers in a major way about using AI to influence his art. Is that going to happen in other categories of the industry, right? Is it going to happen in the content creation world? Are we going to be ostracized for utilizing AI in content creation? You know, it's very interesting. AI is a freight train that is coming that we can't stop, but we might be able to change the direction a little bit, right?
Well, you know, I think that there's definitely concerns, and the traditionalists will always push back against it, which I don't think is the wrong thing. But, you know, there are also a lot of people who might have really good ideas in terms of stories and writings, but don't have any sort of artist acumen or any sort of skill in trying to, you know, get a artist to work with them or whatever, but they might have a phenomenal story that they can write themselves and then put it to AI, right? So that there, I think that there's creative outlets that could be pursued without, you know, and still be respected. But I'm speaking from a very Pollyanna, positive perspective, whereas, you know, speaking from a very straightforward perspective, you could see how there's a lot of cheating that can be done and soulless, you know, everything that comes out. You know, when you see AI, you know it's AI. There's a certain lack of sort of like style to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can look at certain artists, and you're like, that's a Delato, that's a, you know, Perillo, that's whatever. Yeah. And you look at AI and you're like, that's AI, you know? And so it's like, you know, that's a big deal. That's a big deal in comics, especially. I don't like looking at those glossy pages of just, you know, some pulled out of a can art.
That's why you like Lee Bermejo, right? That grittiness.
Hell yeah, man.
And that's why I think people's taste in art changes many times throughout their life. I've talked about it before where, You know, back in when Ed McGuinness was taking over Superman, I was a huge Ed McGuinness and a fan of the more cartoony art style, right?
I never got into McGuinness's art.
And it changed. You know, it changed to more the gritty Capullo, you know, type stuff. And now that everybody has kind of become the Perillo or Delato or Art Germ, very polished, like you're saying, Nick, I'm changing back to a different style of art that I like. Right now, I'm going back into the cartoony stuff. I'm falling more in love with Tony Fleece and Jay Stevens and you know, those type of guys again, because there's too much of the polished stuff out there.
Well,
Jesse,
actually, hold on though. We got Nick here. How many covers have you put on Key Collector just for the cover spec that have later been found out to be AI generated?
I don't think any.
Right.
Yeah, we don't.
You've
really
had
do a whole
Matina
lot of-
covers on there.
Yeah, maybe like 5 years ago when he was doing a lot of the Batman
Okay.
stuff.
Right.
But since then,
All right.
I don't really think we don't. You know, I think the cover spec thing is, by and large, we're not there anymore. You know, cover spec might have been a thing like 4 or 5 years ago, but it's just not. It's not a thing right now.
I agree.
So
I mean, there are not that it's. I mean, it will. It's always there's always a cover that will create demand, but
it's
by and
trending
large,
down.
not like it was. Yeah, it's trending down. Absolutely.
So could something like, I know this is going to be a weird question because obviously we're not there right now. Could AI anti-trend? Is that possible? Where there's
already
such
is.
a negative to it that AI book could actually negative trend where the value goes down?
Well, I don't think it'll
Maybe
bring
couple
down
weeks.
the value in things, but definitely, I think that it could cheapen the industry. I mean, it could have an effect on the industry in a negative way because it just doesn't have. The thing about comics is we all know is that there is that legacy. I mean, people still pine for the days of newsprint in comic books. You know, there you go. So it's like when anything changes in comic books, it gets a lot of pushback. So AI coming on the scene in comic books, it's going to be really hard to win over an audience. So you're going to have people who will be okay with AI, and those are the people who are younger and who are accustomed to it and who don't think it's a big deal. And then you're going to have the more traditional comic book collectors doing what they do, and the industry can, you know, pander to both. But we're only seeing this AI in its infancy right now. I mean, imagine it's going to get way better to the point where we won't even be able to recognize that it's AI. It'll probably be unable to even discern an artist's, you know, work. And, you know, the industry of comics, it has to adapt. So the only way to sustain in this technologically advanced world for any industry is adaptation. So somehow comic books will have to adapt to the advent of AI and make it work for them, but at the same time retain its traditional base.
Right. And so my question is, if you put a book out, and I've talked about this almost every single week, if you put a book out and you put 10 copies of that book, let's just say 3 different covers, 10 copies each, and you sell all 30 copies, right? And they find out it's AI afterwards. Do you see a negative trend there, or does the traditional customer base even care?
I don't know if they care. Look at that Mark Zuckerberg versus Elon Musk comic that came out. That was,
shout out to television.
Again, I don't know if that.
Yeah.
And you know, to what degree was that again?
Well, you know what I think
market
that is, Nick?
manipulation, because it was selling for like $500 and now it sells for like $50. So it's kind of hard to say like to what degree that is a
AI versus or
market manipulation in terms of the resale on you know.
Well, and
in the
also
secondary
he was
market.
very smart because he gave them to influencers.
Well, hold on
In
here.
the end-
You guys don't know what you're talking about here. Let me tell you what happened, because I do know Television. He's a friend. And this is what a lot of people don't realize with Television is he didn't give them to influencers only. He gave them all away for free. Not a single
I
book did he
understand
sell.
that.
Hold on.
But
Hold
he
on.
did
Hold on. Just
also-
let me
hold on,
finish.
Brian, though,
You got to let
you're
me
missing
finish.
the-
You got to let me finish. Just let me finish. Can I finish? Can I finish?
Well, you interrupted
Okay, I'm
us
finished.
talking about
Okay,
it,
I'm finished.
so go ahead, finish.
Where did that come from? South Park. All right. So here's the thing about Tilla. Why I think Tilla, and this is why I think, and not just Tilla. There's a difference here between somebody who says they are using AI and out with it and saying, hey, this is part of my process. Here's where I use AI in the process and is very open about it, and it becomes part of the creation process of the art, compared to somebody who hides it, right? That doesn't mention it, that tries to keep it away. There's that factor that we have to factor in. Tilla wasn't making any money off of this stuff. He was giving it away as pure art and art only. Every single book that he's ever created was a pure giveaway that he only created a small amount of copies for.
But Brian, we weren't talking about Tilla in general. We were talking
He
about
was.
Tilla's business plan.
That's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you
But
Tilla's
his
business plan.
But Nick was talking about how this thing was 500 and is now it's 50, and that it isn't, that it wasn't about AI. It wasn't about Tilla. It was about why it raised so high to $500 as an AI book was because on top of all the free copies to his friends or anyone who knew who he was that he gave away, he also made sure they went to the people who would put it out there on market first to sell it, and it because it was an AI book.
When did he ever do that?
That was on your show. He said, "Hey guys, I'll send you guys copies, and I'll make sure you get a copy and you get a copy. But if you see me at this show, I'll give you a copy." That's what I'm talking about.
You just said, but no, hold on, Dennis. You just said
I'm not saying it's a negative.
Let me interrupt real quick.
I know you're not, but you said that he's selling them,
real quick
giving
to
them
make
to
a
sellers.
correction. By the way, he had two versions of it. The one that was the limited to 100 goes still for like $150 to $200, and then the one that came out in New York goes for about $50.
Superman
so I
variant.
I want to make that correction just so it's not like so that
I'm not trashing on him. I'm saying it was very smart to do it that way, and it also gives the illusion that this AI generated book that he made no money off of, but by giving it to a handful of the people he did give it to make sure they got it. He knew they were going to go on Whatnot that day. He knew they were going to go on eBay that week. And
Who did he do that to?
I don't know. Tell me.
Well, then, if you're saying it, you have to know. Like he didn't give
then
these to
pull up
anybody.
eBay and see who sold them. I don't know. I'm not casting a dispersion.
Well,
but
what
I
I'm
know
saying-
for a fact he was on every one of the shows that I watch, making sure that the people who he told them, I'm going to send you a copy. Oh, I'll give you a copy when I see you. Yep, I got a copy saved for you.
But you're making it. I get that, but you're making it.
Pull up the video.
You're making it. You're making it sound like he sent a bunch of copies to a Whatnot seller to sell on Whatnot. He didn't do that.
I didn't say he gave to a bunch of copies. He made sure that 5 or 6 people who also sell on Whatnot got the copies.
Okay.
And what are you going to do? If I gave a copy to Comic Tom at San Diego Comic Con when I know he's going live in 2 hours, do I think it's going to get sold for $200 or $300 on Comic Tom show? Probably.
I got you. Okay.
Okay. That's not a freaking rocket science, Brian. That's how you get the name out for your book.
All right. So, Nick, let me ask you, since we're talking about convention books, there's a sense that convention books oversell, right? Every single time because of live streaming, right? You're live streaming from that convention.
Okay,
that
you're talking about okay.
Yeah. So how do you determine a convention book? Does the trend start the following week? How do you trend that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like the online, the live selling, I mean, it's not something that, I mean, we'll have it on the app, we'll have but we're not really putting that much because it's too volatile, right? The resale of it is too volatile. So you'll see 2 weeks after the convention, it's selling for, 10 times the amount that the purchase price was. And then 3 months later, like nearly every single one is below the purchase price. And I'm not saying that people are buying it strictly to resell for a lot of money. I'm just saying that it's such a volatile collectible that attempting to attempt, and there's so many of them, to keep up with that level of up and down with the sale, or up and then down, is just kind of, you might as well just keep it at what it's priced at. And then if you see a couple months later that there is demand for something in particular, then you go back in and you start, and you can make some pricing changes on it. But as a rule in Key Collector, I don't put books on the trending lists, or on the top variant list, or on the top comic list, or any of the lists that have that much of a advantage to an individual to sell for a lot of money. And you could, people could criticize that all they want, but I know this market has so much potential for manipulation that when you have somebody that has 1,500 copies of a comic book and it's solely their own thing, like, even though I trust Comic Tom, I consider him a very good friend. He's a great guy. I'm not going to put any of his exclusives on a trending 20 list or on any list, because it just doesn't, it's limited, right? So that doesn't even have anything to do with it. But just the fact that there is one entity that seems that will benefit from that comic book being on Key Collector, because there's potential for the value to increase just based on the broadcast that it has.
Bad ideas.
Well, when was the last time you saw something bad idea?
Well, I know. But the point is what was the last? I mean, I think I finally have exposed their snake oil.
I don't even know what's going on with them at this point. I mean, I don't know if they haven't come out with anything like.
Just they weren't making comics; they were making gimmicks.
I mean,
I disagree.
I think their marketing was gimmicky, but I think that they were putting a lot of effort into making a good comic book. They had good artists, they had good writers, they had artists and writers that make, that have been in the industry for decades.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to our previous thing, though. If the comics were that good, why not take it to Kickstarter if you're looking for the most amount of customers?
They have.
I think they did.
Yeah.
Right, but it wasn't huge.
Yes, it was.
I think they wanted. I think they wanted.
Was it?
Initially,
Megalith, I'll bring it up.
Yeah. Initially, I think they wanted to.
And then, but if it's that good, put it in diamonds. Sell it to 1,200 retailers, not just the 200 hand-picked retailers.
You could say that about Image and the compendium. It's not smart business, right? $400,000. Right?
At the same time,
how much?
400,000.
Okay.
At the same time, Dennis, though.
And Nikki Barucci's at what? How much?
300,000. But it's on a major character. Darkwing Duck's a bigger character than a new character.
Barucci Bell. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Ryan, can you get a Barucci Bell for every time? Yeah, every
well, Nikki's also in the chat. Nick, one thing I do want to talk about is, you brought up the Comic Tom thing, and I know the answer to this, but I want to ask it. You did put Crashdown on your Nick's picks, right?
It was the key of the week, and because it's the key of the week of Key Collector Comics, because out of everything that came out that week, wouldn't you? Is it a stretch to think that I might be interested in reading something
Not at all.
that
He's your friend too. Yeah.
Wrote.
Well, no, I think you were absolutely.
Right?
I'll defend you on this.
Yeah.
I defended you when everybody was bitching about it. I'm like, so the number one YouTuber in the comic space just wrote his first ever comic book after growing up in a comic book store. Of course, that's going to be something we all should check out.
You want to know if he's got the writing talent. You want to know
he could be the next Warren Ellis, and this is his first book.
Absolutely, I think it's a really, just like if. Isn't Mickey working on a comic book that he's
Sanity Kickstarter?
I would love. Very interested in reading that.
It's excellent.
When Reggie put his comic book up, I didn't talk to Reggie I mean, I except once or twice on like a podcast, but I was interested in his book, and I put it out there so that people could know that it existed. So, yeah, I don't think that it was genuinely the thing that I found most interesting about a comic book that week. So,
yeah, I agree. And here's the other thing.
But to the credit of Key Collector Comics, I have to say, how often do you hear people go and complain about something that was the pick of the week? You don't really. That was like the first time that's ever happened. In like
well, not only
5
that,
years
Nick,
that people complained about it.
Lefteros has a great point here. Lefteros says the key of the week says Nick's pick. Nick is a person that is free to make his own pick, whatever he chooses personally. And this guy's a friend. You support your friends the same way that I'm willing to get into an argument or a highly angry conversation with Dennis about television, right?
And it's the best.
Yeah,
right?
you're going to support your friends. There's a difference between supporting your friends and pumping and dumping. There's a big difference.
Of course, and it's not like there's any secret about Comic Tom and Key Collector having a cross-promotional relationship. There's no money exchange. There's no money exchange in anything, which is why that's part of the trust factor of what the resource that Key Collector Comics is that you don't see like all these different publishers or books being boosted, or any of these variants or store exclusives being put front and center, even being put on our list, because once that starts to happen, it is, there's a lot less credibility for what we have to offer.
Yeah.
I think that also puts pressure on the retailer as well. If we're showing up, if our exclusives are showing up on these lists, that's not what our goal is. Our goal is to sell out that product, go to the next exclusive. The question I had two convention questions. The second convention question is it an advantage for you not to go to conventions and get caught up in all the actions that happen at conventions?
It's a good question, and I've gone and it might be at a point now where that's not a problem, but there was a time when I thought going to a convention and representing the app just had too much of a like a personal face to it, whereas when you download an app, generally it's an app. You don't think of it as having like people behind it, right?
Right.
So especially in comics, because nobody trusts anybody. So having a human face that's associated with the app does have, the potential to be scrutinized as, okay, can I trust this guy? Can I trust the information that's on the app? So, but it also coincided with the pandemic, lockdown stuff, and it just, conventions weren't happening. So after everything opened up, it was like, to have a presence at a convention, it has to be really thought out. There has to be a strategy in place. There has to be, a bunch of things that are made just visually to make. So it's such a big project that does it make more sense at this time for my energy to be put into the projects that are on app? Or does it make more sense for me to market the app? Well, I always want to make the app better, so my energy being put into the app instead of getting it out there more and more and more. I always go with the quality of the app over the quantity.
Do we feel like conventions this last 6 months, the first half of the year, have been a success, or have they, been a failure, or in the middle? Personally, I think from what I've heard from most of the people that are set up at cons, that are selling at cons, it's been a huge success. Comics have been selling well. From the collector aspect, I don't know that much, but I know from the retailer aspect, from the retailers that I've talked to that have sold at cons, the cons have been a big success this year. What do you guys think?
I think it's a great question, but I definitely have absolutely no idea.
Well, I think that what happens is it depends on when we get to the retailers, and there's 1,200 retailers. There's 77,000 people that sell comics on eBay or on eBay. And so what happens is I think a convention gives a platform, a visible platform to people that don't have comic book stores. Not to say comic book stores don't set up at conventions. Very small percent of them is. You figure, what, 10% are comic book stores. The rest are just overall sellers. So conventions, I think, have been very successful. The problem with conventions is you can't track anything for success. You have one measure for success at a convention, which is attendance. That doesn't mean people bought stuff. That means people went to the convention, right? If you
but let's not, what about, let's not, it's very important for people to visually see what they're buying in their hand as opposed to on eBay or Heritage. I mean, it's definitely, it serves a purpose. I could tell you, you could buy comic books anywhere, sure. But you know what it's like to get prepped for a convention, knowing how much money you're going in with, going doing that first round of looking around to see what all the retailers have. And like, I know I want that, but let me, and then start price comparing. So I think that it offers a totally different experience in comic buying that you can't get anywhere except a comic book convention. I mean, walking out of there with a heavy bag, there's no more exciting feeling than that about a convention, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Guys,
I think there is.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to break in real quick. I have to go. I apologize.
No worries, brother.
I will see you. Nick, thank you so much
Dennis,
for being on the show.
Thank you, man. It's nice to see you. I hope you're doing okay.
All right, brother.
Definitely.
I'll check in on you
All right,
later,
buddy.
brother.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah, I think he's going to go do a dynamite buy.
Yeah.
I think he's going to dynamite the toilet. I don't know. Who knows?
But I think, again, if you take conventions, over 400 comic book conventions a year, that's a big part of our culture. It's a big part of our tradition. So when I go to conventions, I don't see a lot of people with their phones and looking at their apps at prices. They're like, oh no, I need this book. Unless they're going to a specialty item place like Image, who has an exclusive, right? And so I think it's a very nice split at conventions. And since you don't trend conventions, which is very, very, I would be hard to do. And the only way you can do it is it's because basically someone's paying full price for something, right? To then go sell it to someone on a live show who's going to sell it to someone who's going to flip it again. So it's actually 3 flips.
Yeah.
So that's crazy what's going on right now.
Well, and the other thing is, listen, one of the things that's always talked about at cons is pricing, right? You've got these people, a lot of people say that the pricing is way too high at cons and this and that. Pricing is always an issue in comic books. And, Nick, that's one of the things that a lot of people talk about the Key Collector app. People in the chat are talking about tonight, and I would be remiss not to bring it up. How hard is it to keep pricing current on books on the app?
Well, I mean, look, let's be honest here. It's from my perspective, everybody has a different idea of what something should be priced at, right? A lot of people don't even really look at TerraPeak, where you have the actual purchase price of the item. We pull in a lot of data. We're looking at averages, and there's a lot of so yeah, definitely things are missed. There's things that are missed, but by and large, from the weekly reviews that we do of our pricing, we hit on them significantly. Some people might not understand the scope of our pricing, which is high grade, which is an ungraded book, mid-graded book, that we're actually, those 3 prices are not, people will reach out to me and say, this sold for $250. How come that's not the high grade? And it's like, well, because it's not the highest sale. This is an average value. So anytime you look at, I've had so many people reach out and about books, pricing, and then I check them. I always check them because, there's times when people are absolutely right. But then you go and you look and it's like, okay, maybe we're $5 off on a $150 book, but I'm not going to worry about that. This is price guidance. As I like to say, it's a price guide. It's not it's almost impossible to get down to a certain type of, such a specific number. And I really don't think that, I just don't even think that's really possible. But yeah. I mean, anybody can reach out and let us know if there's something that's off. I'd love to hear it and re-examine it.
I also think a lot of people think that you have this, warehouse full of people sitting at computers constantly looking up the prices and the values.
We do, but
that's the other thing. Like it's I get that people
no one's ever going to be happy. It doesn't, even if we had a country of people that were constantly managing a price based on every single sale, there would still be people that are like, sales are wrong, the values are wrong. It's just the nature of what opinions and objective thinking is. Again, though, I mean, I'm absolutely open to anybody reaching out and saying, hey, why don't you take a look at this price? I love to hear from people. But for just somebody to blast out and say, oh, the price is so wrong, it's like, okay, well, let's, how about an example?
Yeah, let's be a little constructive.
Let me ask you something more geared towards you. Where is your industry trending?
What do you mean?
So with everybody else that is doing this, starting to do this, or has their pages, where is your industry trending? Is it still, you got key collectors who over here, you got Overstreet over here? Is there any trending way to do it better that you foresee?
I mean, that's such a.
Or do you think there needs to be more trending in your line of business?
Well, I mean, you had Overstreet was a singular thing for a very long time, for the most part, and I think that once you get too many cooks in the kitchen, that it could really start to confuse the hobby, right? If you have like 10 different resources that are saying 10 different things about every single book, which a lot of them do, because there's different criteria and there's different algorithms that are used to determine pricing. So again, it all, and that's, and the eBay button on Key Collector is actually dual, something that can be used to make a quick purchase, but also something that can be used to go and check the price on something in real time, use the sold checklist and the options and look and see if you're looking to make a decision on something. Then now, if you want to know the value of your entire collection, I mean, it's a little harder just because of the crazy changing. I mean, I saw you type in Stormwatch number 4, and I'm looking, I see the first sale, and these are near mint, 30. We have it at $65. I see a very fine near mint is $38 sale. This is Terra Peak. Stormwatch, another one is $62. These are ungraded. 2 others are $50. One of them says near mint minus. So I look at something like that and I go, okay, I think we got a pretty good handle on that particular book, because it seems just by the recent sales over the past 3 months, we're pretty much there. Of course, you have an outlier that's $100 from May, but
it included other books too. Yeah.
But then you look at 2 weeks before that and you see a near mint that's $50.
Yes.
So what's, $70, let's say, okay, 60, what, you just.
Sometimes people get lucky. People don't know what they're selling. Somebody gets a book for super cheap. The current FMV is, like you said, it's a very interesting value that we all have different ways of gathering. The other thing
Oh,
is,
yeah.
Nick, the other thing is that, I mean, so many people act like they're going to create an app that's going to, do what your app does. As a matter of fact, I remember a bozo here in Phoenix many years ago. The way I met him is because he was going around to every comic shop saying, I've got this new app that I'm going to create that's better than Key Collector. I don't even think it lasted him 4 weeks talking about it, yet alone him trying to create anything, because it is so hard to create and to keep up to date, to keep moving. There's so many different factors to have a successful app to begin with, yet alone in the comic book world that has to go and find these values and this data. And it's not an easy thing to do.
No, absolutely not. And it's I mean, you're talking about over 500. We have over 500,000 individual issues in the database now. So but it's a constant refining. There's definitely the input from the collecting community that is always of great value, and there's always more emphasis on the next technological implementation in the app. I mean, we've had data scientists work with the pricing. We've had just a ton of different. I mean, a lot of it is my development team that works on that, so I just don't know the nuts and bolts of it. But
Sure.
we're always trying to refine it as best as possible.
Yeah.
So I have two questions for you.
And then I got to take off just because it's getting late. And
I can tell. I can tell when Nick gets tired. So,
but please.
Yeah. So the first question is, define the word key for us.
Well, of course, everybody's going to have their own definition. But when I look at something like Key Collector, I look at it as a comic books as a pop culture category. Key Collector is what I would consider the history book of what that is. So a key issue is something that has a character in the instances and events in that character's timeline that is important to them and the universe in which they exist. So usually that's origins and first appearances, second appearances. But characters, when I say universe in which they exist, I'm talking about, we don't really recognize like the character that appeared in 5 issues in 1975 and you never saw them again, because there's just, we don't want to overburden the app with information, right? And then there's also the segment of iconic covers, and then there's a segment of scarcity. So we try to hit those different niches of collectors where you have then also, okay, what was in Seduction of the Innocent? So in terms of older books, we'll give key status to something that deviates from the value of other books published in the same series around the same date. So if you look at something like, let's say, Super Streak Comics, like a 1940s book, if you have 8 issues in that series that are, and I'm just throwing out examples, all priced at $1,000, except one of them is priced at $5,000, well, that will have a key issue significance. And it might be a first appearance, but it might just be cover art by Alex Schomburg or cover art by Matt Baker, or something that is more desirable to a collector. So there's a facts page on Key Collector, the website, an FAQ that really goes a little bit more into detail on some of this stuff. But, a key issue to Key Collector follows that criteria. And also there's some print run stuff, but generally if there's a modern book that was a $3 book at the time of it going on sale, but it resells for $8 or $10, there's got to be a reason for it, whether it's scarcity or whether it's late in the issue run or introduces some concept, then that's something that also has some, but it doesn't always have to be value, right?
Sure.
I mean, there's controversial books that have had
Snowflame,
interesting, right. Well, now that's probably like a $30 book, but at one point it was a $4, $3 book, and it was just such an interesting character. You kind of know that, okay, with enough people that know about this, yeah, it's, you know, it's so unique that it needs to be known as part of the history of comic books.
Yeah.
Snowflame.
So I may catch you on something here. So about an hour and a half ago, you said you should probably look at investing in nostalgia books, properties that have not been used yet. But in this conversation, you said Fallout characters aren't technically important.
What characters?
Fallout, first appearance, last appearance characters that only.
Well, I'm talking about, like, when I say nostalgia, like I said, I was talking about like properties like RoboCop, Terminator, maybe even some old horror ones. But if we're talking about, like, you know,
Fall Off Farm Boy or something like that, right?
yeah, I mean, even that character has some, you know, I think wasn't like Suicide Squad, it has some aspect of, but you know, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of characters that have been introduced for 3 issues and then you never hear about them again. That's just, you know, some people might be interested in that, and for that you have like DC fandom and Marvel fandom. Those are those are fan sites, you know, those are sites that are, you know, crowd, that fans just, I mean, fandom. It's not like Marvel or DC actually created those sites. Those are fan populated information.
Like Wikipedia, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you can look up, you know, Gargantuan Boy, and find his first appearance and only appearance. It's just something that, you know, the point of Key Collector is for people to go to, you know, the antique shops or conventions and have a resource that is distilled enough to make this massive, massive, massive hobby of decades, almost a century, somewhat easily distilled, but, you know, somewhat
accessible.
What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, accessible, digestible, whatever word.
Yeah.
So my last question, that one was kind of filler question.
All right.
Grade the first 6 months of the year, and are you excited about the last 6 months?
Well, I mean, I think there's always high points in comic books. It doesn't matter what, you know, what year it is or what's going on. You know, the Ultimate line has done really well, right? And people seem energized by that. I do like that there's less conversation about reselling and spec and all of that. I like that we seem to be getting back to form in a lot of ways. I mean, even we were talking before the show how DC has gone back to Wednesdays in their book deliveries. That just is happening this week for the first time in 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
And, you know, there's exciting books, independents that have come out. Books are still being optioned. You know, we had 3 different options in the past week and a half: A Vicious Circle. What else? Of course, I'm going to draw a blank right now.
You were talking about
Mindset.
Yeah.
And Proof. You know, those are 3. And Get Hero, that Anthony Bourdain book. You know, so we had 4 comic books in the past 2 weeks that were options. So it's still a rife mine that production houses are going to for content.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that it's been a good year. I think it's been a year of stability. I do think that values on the secondary market are getting back to a place where it's feasible for people to actually get in and buy, but it's not where it was 5 years ago. I mean, it's definitely taken a step up. Values on key issues are significantly up for the most part than 5 years ago.
Yes.
From 3 years ago, no, which is fine. It needed to correct.
Yes.
And we're there now. And I think that we're just reaching a place of stability.
Yeah.
And I think that makes everybody more comfortable in the hobby. And it just makes it a lot more copacetic instead of, I mean, think about how much people were fighting during that time. Like,
Yeah.
not last year, but like the year before that, and like the 2 years preceding that. I feel like the collectible hobby community was really toxic to one another.
Yes.
And I feel like that's eased back a little bit, right?
Oh, I've seen it, immensely, right?
Yeah.
That has been one of the biggest things, that reason why I do what I do over here Beyond Wednesdays, right? The toxicity got so crazy. And some things needed to change. We needed to spread out maybe a little bit, or figure it out. And I think we are figuring it out. I think the most important thing is what you said, that I think we're getting back to a place where reading comics is becoming. We're getting back to that place where reading is the important thing. The stories. We need more Doom by Sanford Green and Hickman, right? We need more Blood Hunt. We need more Energon Universe type stories that people are actually reading, and they're not just putting in a bag and board and putting away in their closet.
Absolutely. We need good stories. And look, that I always look at, the success of comics being a 3-pole tent pole, which is collectors, which is speculation, and which is readers. So there's with one of those being completely eliminated from the equation, it's going to be very hard for comic books to survive.
Yes.
So
Couldn't
I
agree
appreciate
more,
you guys, what you do, and having me on. Thank you, and I appreciate everybody who's stuck around and listened. My gosh.
Well,
And
Nick,
supported the app. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you so much, man. We appreciate you coming on. It's one of the best shows that we do over here, having you on. We're going to continue to bug you to come on as much as possible. And more than anything, I hope to see you in San Diego, brother. So figure out a way to get out there.
Yeah, I'll give it a try. And thanks everybody who watched. And please, reach out with any feedback. We're always open to it. And again, guys, Jesse, Brian, and the absentee Dennis, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Appreciate you, brother. Much love.
All right.
Nick from Key Collector, ladies and gentlemen. That's the type of shows that we love to give over here. But before we leave, Jesse, I want to know your thoughts on the first half of the year and what you expect on the second half of the year.
Sure. The one thing I want to say about Nick, it's good to have someone on who's not trying to sell a book. All right. So no matter who we bring on, even if they're not trying to sell their book, it still comes across that they're trying to sell their book, right? Mm-hmm. No matter how much they try to get away from it. And so when you get data like that, I've known Nick right when he was starting Key Collector, he has never changed. Same persona, same voice, doesn't cuss as much, so that's a good thing right there. So 2024 has been a fantastic year for retailers that have decided that their storefront, their brick and mortar, isn't their lifeline, their 100% lifeline. We have so many lifelines that are given to us, and a lot of retailers have decided, no, I'm going to stay with the path that we have done the last 80 years. People like myself, people like Dennis, I can name hundreds of retailers out there who have platforms, who are live streaming, who are doing e-commerce, web pages, expanding their brand, social networking, and using all those tools, I think is what will make this second half even better. I do challenge people to not be afraid to fail. And if they're not afraid to fail, they'll be very successful. Next week, I will be making an announcement. I'll probably do it live on the Tuesday show, even though the announcement will probably come out on Saturday. And we're doing one of the largest things ever retail could do in the comic book history. But that entails bringing everybody with us. So I'm very excited. I've watched a lot of very successful people that I've never known. That we've become great friends, and we're all like-minded. Sell more comics, give great customer service, obviously ship on time and do all that stuff. But remember that there's no such thing as a bad customer, right? You, like Nick just said, you got readers, You got sequential buyers and you got key buyers, and technically you got flippers as the fourth. There's no such thing as a bad buyer for a retailer. So I will tell everybody, go support your local comic book store as much as you can. There's only 1,300 of us. That number's then continue to drop over the years, and we're fine with it. But I think that's where we're at. I give the first 6 months an A++. I think the only negative there is going to be how we accept AI in the future.
Before I got a couple things before we leave. I agree with you, Jesse. I think that this year has been very positive so far for the comic book industry. I think that where we're heading is even brighter. I think in the speculation and the secondary market sales, I think that correction was very, very necessary to keep that secondary market and that speculation world going. Otherwise, it was just going to fall apart. And not only that, I want to congratulate you, Jesse Criscione, for the nomination of the Spirit Awards for the Eisner Awards. Congratulations. How many years have you been nominated now?
So this is our 13th year. And then we're also up for 4 BPAs and 1 Hawksman Award this year. It's funny about awards. People will say, well, it doesn't bring you more sales. But at the end of the day, it's just being part of your community. This is something you want to strive to do, is to be part of your community. I don't care if I win. That's the last thing I worry about is winning. I just want to do stuff that says, listen, this guy is doing stuff beyond just selling comics. And that's our goal every year. If we win it, great. If we're not, we got next year. And that's how I look at it. But being part of San Diego, this will be my 39th year going, as long as one of the longest tenured people going. So just walking in to me is into San Diego is a win, regardless if I buy anything or not. So I really appreciate that. And the team's very excited about it. Shannon's very excited about it. And as long as the team is happy, I think that's where we're at. So.
Well, also, we have Nick Barucci in the chat that says, congrats, Jesse. So I also want to say congrats to Nick for a so far very successful campaign on the Darkwing Duck Kickstarter. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find the link to this Kickstarter. It's only got 14 hours to go. So if you want to get in on it, hit that link in the description. I'll also put the link in the live chat for anybody that wants to check it out. You guys know we love Dynamite and Nick Barucci over here, and we're going to try to show him any support we can. So congrats to Nick on that one. That's a big deal. And also to be in the conversation for some of the most positive things to happen in the comic book industry this year. Dynamite was very heavy in that conversation. So congrats on that.
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah. And I think Dynamite continues to, I don't know if raising the bar is the line we want to use, but he continues to one-up himself. And it's always better to one-up yourself than trying to one-up someone else. Yes. And I think that's the good thing about Nick. So
yes. And I also don't want to leave out our other compadre in the show, Dennis. I can't wait to hang out with you in San Diego, my friend, and I hope you're feeling better. Everybody send positive thoughts and prayers to Dennis, who's probably praying to the porcelain god right now. Dennis, I always love to have lively conversations to Dennis, and tonight was definitely one that I for the books. But like I said, I wouldn't have him on the show if I didn't have respect for him and the integrity that him and all the people on the show I have respect for. So
right. And one point there, in any other industry, and I've been in a lot of industries, I've been heads of industries, the comic book world has the most characters in it. There's no store owner that is the same store owner in any way, shape, or form. And that's what makes our industry extremely, extremely awesome to have. We don't have to agree with everybody, and they don't have to agree with us. But at the end of the day, that's what makes the comic book industry just a tad different. We all sell the same stuff, right? We all sell comic books, yet we all have different ways on how we perceive it.
Yeah. Speaking of selling comic books, when's the next sale on eBay Live?
I'm taking today off. I will be back on tomorrow, and then I go nonstop. The funny thing about eBay Live, where I have landed, is we have this. We put up about 120 to 180 items a night. We've had 187 days straight sellouts, and the pressure to continue to grow your business, but also knowing you got to put up 120 to 180 items a night is very stressful in a way, because I do have to ship that stuff out the next day. But so tomorrow night we'll be on, and we're there rock and roll. We do have a special event that we'll announce next week that is more of a, how would you put it? More of a collector and Renaissance type.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. A very Renaissance collectible show next week that has so many guests on it, folks. You think Dennis is throwing up? You guys are going to be saying no more guests.
Well,
so
if there's anything,
we're very excited for
if
that.
there's anything I can say about that is, there has been some crazy things happening in comic books, especially in the world of crowdfunding and all that stuff. But there's been one group that has had success upon success upon success. And not only that, the person that is heading that group is loves comic books. And that is you say when people come on the show, even though they're not trying to sell a book, it sounds like they're trying to sell a book. Yeah. This guy, that above all, he has a love for comic books, and that's very important. And that's another reason why I respect him so much, and I know you respect him so much. So.
Yeah, and the final point about that, folks, listen, I've done this for 42 years now, and I know just about everybody in the industry. With that, I will tell you, one of the only probably things I'm disappointed about in the comic book industry is we have very few comic book fans in the comic book industry, right? And so when I do talk to people and you talk about tradition, culture, we rarely talk about comics. We talk about product they have coming out or new stuff. And so it's one of those things that I wish our numbers were higher as far as comic book collectors in the comic book industry that still love comics, but the industry takes over. Yeah. And they just don't have time. I've talked to people who haven't read a comic, that own a comic book store, haven't read a comic in 10 years.
Yep.
Right? It's amazing to think that. But anyways, fantastic show. I just think it was a great show to listen to someone who has no really game in anything. So
yeah. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Make sure you guys check out Jesse's sale tomorrow night. The 4th, Thursday, I'll have another sale on Whatnot also. Come hang out with us Thursday. We're going to have some crazy stuff available as there's going to be a lot of sales on the 4th of July. Yep. And I want to remind everybody one thing. Not everybody out there loves loud bangs, including your beloved animals and veterans. So make sure you remember that fireworks aren't the greatest thing in the world for everybody. So that being said, stick around for a second. We got a funny little clip that I want to show you that is very reminiscent of tonight's episode. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you soon. Good night.
Thanks, Midget. Shocking report. The controversy began in the small mountain town of South Park, where the local PTA is trying to ban the movie. With us tonight is the head of the PTA, Sheila Broflovsky.
Hello, Tom.
And the Canadian Minister of Movies.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Minister, parents are concerned about your country's entertainment. Your thoughts?
Well, the film is R-rated, and it's not intended for children.
But of course children are going to see it.
Can I finish? The fact is that we Canadians are quite surprised by your outrage.
You just don't care.
Can I finish? Hello, can I finish? The United States has graphic violence on television all the time. We can't believe that a movie with some foul language would piss you off so much.
Because it's evil.
Can I finish? Please, can I finish? Okay, I'm finished.